Imagine that on a beautiful ordinary day of your life, you use a pesticide to try to get rid of a dragonfly. However, you end up inhaling the remnants of that insect, and when you wake up the next day, you realize that dragonfly wings have grown on your back. You've always been someone who felt excluded in elementary school, and because of that, your biggest goal was to be popular in high school. However, you knew you would be judged if anyone discovered your secret, so your initial mission is to hide it from all your friends in order to lead a normal life surrounded by people. Eventually, you accidentally reveal your secret to several people. After being called a monster by those you loved most and being shunned by your friends, someone recruits you to a college exclusively for half-insects, where you can learn to control your abilities and live without revealing your secret to humanity. There you discover a serum that can turn you back into a human, but if you don't become the best student and receive the serum, you will live the rest of your life as a monster. So what would you do? Would you accept your half-insect side, or would you fight to get the serum and return to your normal life? Our story begins with a young man making a video for YouTube while telling the camera that he just saw something very large that looked like a giant insect. As he walks, the young man sees the silhouette of a terrifying creature coming toward him and begins to scream. We see that someone was watching this on their phone, and the person questions whether it was real. In that university classroom, a boy and his friends were talking about the video. The boy with the phone starts mocking and doubting that it was real. However, someone comes over and grabs the phone from the young man to watch the video. The phone's owner is surprised as Su-chan suddenly arrives and snatches his smartphone. Jang, our protagonist, asks what was so cool about those insect wings. Changing the subject, the boy mentions that the girls from his department wanted to go out for drinks and asks if his friends wanted to go. Quickly, the boy's friends change their minds and agree to go with him to the place. Our protagonist begins to explain that he was a popular student. He had over 5,000 followers, his grades were always A's, and he was constantly invited to drink and go on dates with women. In terms of the food chain, we could say that Jang is at the top. The boy also begins to explain what defines a strong person and a weak person at school. Humans live in groups just like animals. In any form or shape, there is a hierarchy. Jang is the person everyone follows and envies at school, and that's why he was the strongest person there. So yes, you're a strong student, and he's not going to give that up, no matter what happens. As he walks with his friends, the black-haired boy asks if Su-chan cared that they were going to drink alone with the other girls. Seeing Jang was confused by the statement, the boy tells him to look back. He then sees far behind them a girl with pink hair calling out to Jang. The woman asks where Jang was going and if he was leaving. Seeing the situation, all of our protagonist's friends start teasing him, saying he was dating Maihee. One of them invites Maihee to join them for drinks, since Su-chan was also going. The girl promptly agrees and starts walking toward Jang to hug him. However, when Maihee was approaching, the boy senses something and quickly makes the girl back off. A strange feeling starts to take over him, and Jang apologizes to his friends. He says that he wasn't feeling well and was going home alone. The whole group is confused but accepts it since Su-chan is like that and does those things sometimes. Before leaving, Jang apologizes again and says he got 5 rounds against the wrestling team yesterday and that's why he was sore. Maihee, looking at the boy, wonders what was wrong with him. Jang walks alone and starts thinking that wrestling was really a good excuse, but he was running out of them. In his head, he thinks he has a secret that he can't tell anyone. As he looks at a blonde boy, the boy compares himself to him. Su-chan remembers that this blonde boy was different at the beginning of the semester as he was popular among his classmates but ended up like that all of a sudden. And the reason the boy ended up like that was because he revealed his insecurity to everyone. One day, he drank too much at a party and became swollen from an alcohol allergy. And with that, he became embarrassed and ran away from the place because of the expressions his friends made. That boy lost his confidence since then and has been wandering around lonely ever since. Jang concludes his reasoning and says that everyone has something they want to hide from others. At his house, the boy also mentions that exposing your insecurity to others is like revealing your weakness. However, in the middle of his thoughts, the boy wonders why he was talking about that. In the bathroom of his house, Su-chan starts to take off his shirt, and we see that his chest and back were completely bandaged. After unwrapping his whole body, the young man says that he also had an insecurity and then see wings on his back. He remembers the moment when his classmates were saying that insect wings were disgusting and feels sad about it. Looking at that weirdness, he thinks that there's no way those things could be cool. The boy then explains that the insect that did that to him was probably a dragonfly. When he was in high school, he sprayed pesticide on a dragonfly that invaded his room. However, the insect suddenly turned to dust. That dust accidentally got into his nostrils and he felt sick for a while and had to rest. The next day, suddenly, wings were coming out of his back. Desperate, he began to wonder what would happen to him and if people would start treating him like a monster. Because of this, he couldn't sleep well due to that fear and has been hiding that peculiarity ever since. It also made him keep his distance from people, as he didn't want to get caught slipping up. Being solitary made his life easier, and his wings remained undiscovered, so Jang was able to focus on his university exams. Even so, being alone all the time was so bad that he wanted to die. So when Su-chan was entering university, he decided to change. First, for the wings, he managed to cover them with some tape. With that, Jang gained more confidence and he was able to change more boldly. And this proved the theory that confidence is the first requirement for success. Surprisingly, little by little, more people started to gather around and follow him. But if people saw those disgusting wings, his university life would be over. Frustrated, the boy thinks that he also wanted to have fun with Mai-hee, but those stupid wings got in the way. Jang explains that his wings are like a muscle in his body, and if he doesn't release them frequently, he wouldn't be able to stand it because he'd feel a huge numbness. That's why he ran, and he didn't want anyone to see those wings. As he was about to leave the bathroom, the boy suddenly came face to face with the pink-haired girl standing right in front of him. Seeing her crushed shirtless, Mai-hee starts to scream in embarrassment, and our protagonist screams in despair. Quickly, he closes the door, and the girl asks what he was doing naked, to which the boy responds that he wasn't. In his head, he thinks that the girl didn't see the wings and tries to ask why Mai-hee was there. Holding a bag, the woman explains that the door was open, and the boys said they were going to drink at his place, so they sent her ahead. Jane becomes extremely worried, trying to think of a solution to get out of that situation. But to his surprise, the girl asks if he really left because he wasn't feeling well. The young woman also says that not just that day, but often Soo-chan sometimes seems sick. Finally, the girl asks if the boy was hiding something. Sad that he couldn't reveal his secret, the boy just replies that he wasn't. Mai-hee then makes up her mind, and placing the bag on the floor, she says they should leave the place. The boy is confused, and the girl responds that they have to go to the movies that day and she will sit there until Jang leaves the bathroom. Soo-chan tries to say that he was sore, but the girl replies that he was obviously lying. Mai-hee comments that it's obvious he was also faking being sick and that Jang was hiding something. Looking down, the girl says that the boy never talks about it, and that's why she's starting to feel a bit sad. Mai-hee asks if the boy remembered how he protected her from that persistent guy at the beginning of the semester, and Jang replies that he does. The girl also says that, to be honest, it was her personal problem, so she was a little embarrassed that Jang got involved without being asked. However, still, she thanks Soo-chan for what he did. Finally, the girl says she also wanted to get involved in his problem. She mentions that if the boy was having a hard time, she wanted him to trust her a little. Leaning his back against the wall, the boy mentally thanks his friend. Right after, Jang gets dressed and opens the door, while telling Mai-hee that they're going to see a movie, while thinking that it wasn't something he could show her. They then, like lovebirds, walk down the streets. Behind them, a strange guy just watches them, thinking that he sensed prey. Near the cinema, some students approach Mai-hee and say they are students conducting a survey, and Mai-hee promptly goes to them. Watching that, our protagonist mentions that anyway, he couldn't stop her from doing it since the girl was very kind. After the survey, Mai-hee gets a lollipop and celebrates. Seeing that gentle smile, Jang can only feel embarrassed. Finally, the two enter the cinema, and at that moment, a thought crosses Jang's mind. He wonders to himself that if one day he dated Mai-hee, at some point he would have to reveal his secret, and at that moment, the girl goes to the bathroom. The boy then questions himself if Mai-hee would treat him well even after seeing his wings. Even so, he was afraid and couldn't confess to anyone what he really was. In the end, the boy concludes that it's really better to continue like this for now. Suddenly, the movie the boy was watching stops playing and everyone in the cinema is confused. Our protagonist tries to look around to understand what was happening. Someone who works at the cinema enters the room and asks everyone to evacuate immediately. The man informs them that there is an emergency in the building and that a dangerous man is wandering around. He also says that this is not an event or a drill, so everyone should leave quickly and follow the instructions. However, someone appears behind the man with mantis-like claws and pierces his stomach. Everyone in the cinema panics and chaos spreads everywhere. Jane becomes extremely worried, trying to figure out what to do. He tells himself that it's dangerous and he needs to escape, but Mai-hee was still there. The mantis-clawed man makes a terrifying expression and looking at Jang says that he has found his prey. Without thinking much, he charges at Soo-chan, who panics. The mantis begins slashing all the seats around him, trying to hit his target. However, Soo-chan manages to back away, and as he faces the predator, he thinks there was no way to escape. Desperate, he tries to understand what was happening. The killer then says that our protagonist was looking at a monster and asks if the boy had ever seen a hybrid insect before. He comments that Jang must have also breathed in that insect powder, the jumbo juice. Upon hearing this, Soo-chan remembers something. Jang recalls that the insect powder the man was referring to must be the same one that turned him into a dragonfly. The psychopath then says that after that drug made him look like a mantis, he was able to smell his prey. That delicious scent when a carnivorous insect like him eats another insect was a wonderful taste. And as he advances on Jang, the man says that the flavor is very, very delicious. Suddenly, something hits the mantis, making him miss his attack on Soo-chan. You then see that the one who threw that object at the killer was Mai-hee. Desperate, the girl says she came out of the bathroom and was told to evacuate, but she didn't leave because she hadn't seen Soo-chan. The mantis, irritated, says there is nothing to fear, and right after, calls Jang his precious food. Realizing something, our protagonist tells the girl to run. He tries to tell her that the place was dangerous, but the mantis was already charging at the girl. Outside, a police officer is arguing with the surveyed girl, and the officer says that under no circumstances could she go inside, as there was a terrorist in the building. The girl says that if the police won't go in, she will, but someone points upward. Everyone notices Mai-hee being thrown off the roof and starting to plummet toward the ground. At that moment, Jang stands up as the mantis bids farewell to his tasteless meal. The boy can only think that he didn't want his friend to die and considers the possibility of using his wings, even though he had never used them before. However, if he opens his wings in front of all those people, he will be judged. He imagines that if he does that, his whole life will be over. Our protagonist mentally apologizes to Mai-hee, thinking that he wouldn't be able to save her. But seeing her fall toward the ground with a sad expression, he makes a decision. Without hesitation, Jang jumps to try to save his friend. The mantis is confused, but at that moment, our protagonist reaches Mai-hee and grabs her in his arms. The psychopath starts laughing, stating that even hybrid insects would die from that height and asking what the coward was going to do. Even though he's determined, the boy still thinks that thousands of people will see this and his way of life will be over. But remembering Mai-hee's speech, he couldn't leave the girl there. Su-chan, fully aware of all the consequences, makes his decision. The boy rips his jacket and activates his wings. Just barely, he manages to stay in the air with Mai-hee. He thinks that he only wanted to hide it from everyone, but now he was revealing his wings in front of several cameras. And that was the end of his life, as his weakness had finally been exposed. The boy thinks that this is the story of the concrete jungle, a story about a young man oppressed in high school. The story of a desperate survival that requires drastic measures. The survey girl, seeing that insect flying in the middle of the city, says that this is a big deal. The girl was wearing headphones, and someone on the other end of the transmission asks what they should do about that guy. However, the girl, while removing her hat and revealing antennas, says that they're going to take him to their school. While filming that, the population tries to understand what was happening. The psychopath finds the situation strange, since Jang had been hiding his wings all this time. Su-chan, while moving through the air, tries to wake up Mai-hee, who had fainted from the impact of being thrown through the window. During his flight, the young man can only think that even though it was his first time doing that, it felt very familiar. Then, in the blink of an eye and with extreme speed, he flies in the other direction, and upon seeing this, the assassin becomes irritated. Seeing that, the man thinks that there was only one insect that had such excellent flying ability, and it was the dragonfly. Analyzing the situation, the man assumes that this bastard received dragonfly DNA through jungle juice. While licking his own face, the man says that his uncontrollable thirst is acting up again, and that he will crush that dragonfly. However, as he is lost in thought, the girl with antennas appears behind him to attack. After defeating him in an instant, the girl thinks that at least she managed to capture this one, but wonders if the boy who flew away realized the mess he had caused. The girl then tells the mantis that besides the videos filmed by the crowd, he committed several murders in the middle of the city and was asking to be caught. And while putting her cap back on, the girl states that beings like them cannot be discovered. A month later, we see our protagonist's friends talking about how the first period is practically over. One of them was watching the incident at the cinema again, and they were all impressed by the wings that Guy had. One of them notices that the guy in the video looked like John. Hooded and trying to hide, Su-chan thinks that the images from that day are on the internet and rumors at school are spreading quickly. The boy also doesn't know if this is a blessing or a curse, as people in any case won't believe it's anything other than some kind of fantasy event. And what was happening now was the same as what happened back then. We flash back to 12 years ago and someone is celebrating a birthday. Jang is distant from all of his classmates and they are all congratulating Junwoo. Our protagonist feels isolated and the teacher says they should also sing happy birthday as Su-chan, but the other boys refuse because they didn't like him. They continue to mock the boy, even commenting on his family's financial situation. Hearing that both his father and mother were poor, Su-chan could only stay away, sad about everything. At that time, all he wanted was to spend more time with the other kids, and if he were normal, he could hope for brief moments of happiness. Back in the present, the boy can only wonder why he always had to be different from the others. The distracted boy doesn't notice someone approaching from behind. The person tries to pull off our protagonist's jacket, but the boy reacts by stepping back. This unknown person was Jang's former friend, who says that the others sent him to check if the boy had wings. The idiot then returns to the group of friends, saying that he almost managed to see if he was really that person. Jang thinks that all his classmates are treating him like an animal and can't believe these are the people he used to talk to. The popular guy who had everyone around him is no longer anything. On the bus, the boy is immersed in his thoughts, mentioning that it's been a while since he used his social media and that he wanted to see what was going on. He notices that most people stopped following him, and that's because they're saying the government was interrogating the people who were in the video. So it makes sense that they wouldn't want to get involved in that. The boy tells himself that it's probably for the best because it didn't matter if people were dropping out. Jang clicks on Mei-hee's profile picture and he comments that at least he still had the girl. The young man says that he heard Mei-hee had fully recovered from fainting that day and that she was being discharged that day. Recalling the good moments with his friend, Soo-chan states that all he needed was her. However, when he visits her, the only reaction the pink-haired girl has is to scream at him to stay away. The boy is confused, asking what happened, and tries to explain that he is her friend, Soo-chan. In his head, the boy says that Mei-hee was kind and caring to him. However, the Mei-hee he knew was no longer there, and the girl says that after that day, he was never to see her again. Finally, she calls him a monster, and right after that, the boy is thrown out of the consultation room. At home, our protagonist is looking at himself in the bathroom mirror, blaming everything that happened on his wings. Jang grabs a pair of scissors and prepares to cut them off right then and there. However, the young man becomes increasingly hesitant and cannot bring himself to cut off a part of his body. He then lets the scissors fall and immediately after collapses onto the floor, crying. Jang can't believe that even after all of this, he was still afraid of the pain, and he wonders why he was so pathetic. A month later, our protagonist is walking through the streets of the city. Hooded and hiding his face, the boy walks with his head down, thinking that humans live a social life. Among all animals that live socially, there will always be one that doesn't fit in. Those outcasts, they all meet the same end. The young man, now standing on the rooftop of a building, prepares to jump and concludes his thought that all outcasts meet the same end, which is death. He is certain of what he's going to do because it would make things easier. After jumping, the boy can only say that he never wanted to suffer again. However, in the middle of the fall, his wings activate and the boy realizes he couldn't even die or fall by his own will. Frustrated, he keeps cursing those wings are his. Suddenly, the same girl from the day at the cinema approaches Jang and introduces herself as Park. The young woman, stuck to the wall with a gentle expression, says that she would love to have Jang's wings. Soo-chan is extremely confused, questioning who this girl was and how long she had been there. But the more important question was how she was walking on the wall. Then Park says that the boy has wings, and yet he jumped off a building to die, which was a dumb idea. Finally, the young woman asks if he really hated his wings that much, and immediately after, she removes her cap. After revealing her antennas, the girl says that there is a way to go back to normal, and asks if the boy wants to know. Seeing this opportunity, he becomes extremely excited, thinking that this might be his only chance. He also thinks that with those antennas, she probably ingested jungle juice too. Suddenly, Park asks if they can talk somewhere else. In a room in that building, the boy throws Park against the wall. Frustrated, he asks what he has to do to return to normal. The girl casually replies that she doesn't know and that if he wants to find out, there's a condition. Park says that Jang has to go to her school and then the professor will explain how it works. The young man, upon hearing this, becomes extremely confused. The girl then informs him that there's a school bus waiting for them on the first floor, and if he goes with her, he'll have the chance to meet the professor. Soo-chan asks how he could trust her, especially since that scary mantis tried to kill him just the other day. The girl replies that if he doesn't trust her, he could go back to the other side of the building and try jumping again. But if he trusts her and gets on the bus, our protagonist won't be alone anymore. Though reluctant, remembering all of his past, he agrees. Inside the bus, Jang, lost in his thoughts, mentions that he still didn't trust Park 100%, but he had nowhere else to go. Holding a spray in her hand, the girl asks Jang if he recognizes that insecticide. The boy realizes what it is, and the girl responds that it's jungle juice, the substance responsible for fusing human DNA with insect DNA. The girl explains that the spray became popular, but the problem was that if you killed the insect with it, the DNA of that insect would fuse with the nearest human body. Just like what happened with Jang and that mantis, some part of the body becomes similar to the insects. Jang then asks who the bastard was that made the spray, and the girl replies that they still don't know. She says the company that made it and its creator are a mystery, and the only thing that's been discovered is that an unimaginable number of people have been exposed to it. Soo-chan asks how no one knew about this, and Park replies that they're hiding all the traces. When she says we, the boy doesn't understand since it's plural, and he questions it. However, the girl ignores him and stands up, walking toward the exit and getting off the bus. He asks what's going on as they're still inside the tunnel. The girl goes to a wall and informs him that the tunnels are built deep inside the mountains. Park does something and suddenly a secret passage opens and the girl explains that they don't like to expose themselves, which is why they live hidden. She starts walking through the secret door while saying that this is their campus city. After passing through that entrance, we see that amidst the mountains there was a huge city called the Nest. Our protagonist asks if that was a university and says he never imagined there would be something like that in the middle of the mountains. However, Jang notices that everyone there has insect-like characteristics and it felt like being in a jungle. The boy can't believe there were so many half-humans like him and wonders if he will really find a way to be normal again in that place. At the top of a building, the mantis from before is being taken to prison but realizes that his prey, the dragonfly, has arrived in the city. The guard escorting him gets angry, electrifying the man and saying he'll be used for all kinds of experiments to pay for his crimes. With an extremely frightening expression, the man just stares at Jang and says they will meet again. Upon arriving there, Jang is extremely impressed by the number of people like him. He then asks if everyone there was different, and Park explains that everyone living there was affected by jungle juice. Park informs him that although the place is called a university, it's really just a place to protect people like them. The young woman also says that Jang won't be alone there. Finally, she says that she'll be back after reporting to the department office what happened. And before leaving, the girl welcomes Jang to the nest. As he walks through the forests of that place, the boy thinks that he never would have imagined such a thing existed in Korea. Suchen says to himself that he can't believe all these people have insect parts and still walk around with them exposed. During his walk, the boy notices some insects moving in one direction. An old man covered in honey was meditating on top of a structure. The man says that in exchange for providing honey, he gets protein from those insects. He starts eating one of the insects and states that this is the cycle of life. Seeing this, Jang becomes extremely disturbed. Stu-chan starts to leave, stating that all the people in that place aren't normal. However, the old man meditating approaches our protagonist, lifting his jacket and asking what kind of insect he was. The old man is impressed that the young man had dragonfly wings, but Jang becomes extremely irritated by this and distances himself from him. The old man says that those wings are flexible enough to be hidden in clothes, and in good condition, those wings are very useful. He then asks why our protagonist was trying so hard to hide them. With a sad expression, the boy begins to remember the moment when Maggie treated him in a ridiculous way. Before leaving, Jang says that he was there to get rid of those things. The old man just watches the boy walk away and then calls him a fool. After that, we see an older man named Mandohyeon introducing himself to Jang. The professor thanks Park for bringing the boy there and says he saw Su-chan on the news. Facing that man, the boy becomes excited, finally meeting the professor who possibly knows how to reverse his condition. He then shakes the man's hand and introduces himself back. Suddenly, the man picks up a TV remote and says he'll get straight to the point. He states that he will reveal how Jang can return to normal, but first, they'll watch a video. Our protagonist is impressed as he didn't expect things to happen so quickly, and the professor explains that he will show a recording of one of their ceremonies. In the video, we see a person calling up someone who completed graduation with a recommendation of the representatives and was the top student of the class. He says that this person who came up on stage will receive the Cinderella serum. Jang is extremely confused, seeing that the person with the fly head was about to drink something. The fly, after drinking it, immediately drops the cup, letting it fall to the ground. What was once a fly starts to transform and soon after turns back into a beautiful and lovely girl. Su-chan asks the professor what that girl just drank, and the man explains that it was something accidentally created in the research department. Using the principle behind jungle juice, it separates insect DNA from the body. In other words, it's the medicine that brings people back to normal, the Cinderella serum, and after saying this, the man shows a small vial with the liquid. Seeing the cure, our protagonist asks if it can really make him normal again. Su-chan immediately becomes desperate, saying that he needs it and wants to be normal again, but the professor says he cannot give him the cure. The young man explains that the Cinderella serum is not easy to synthesize and is based on concentrated jungle juice, so the supply is limited. In other words, unfortunately, they couldn't turn everyone back to normal. But if Jang really wanted it, he would have to enroll in that academy and graduate as the top student in his department. The man also says that they made the Cinderella serum available only to the best students who contributed to the academy, as Jang had just seen in the video. Jang feels extremely reluctant, knowing that if he wanted to obtain the serum, he would have to enroll there. He and Park then return outside and start walking, and the girl asks what he's going to do, but the boy just ignores her, lost in his thoughts. Seeing this, the girl simply says that the choice was entirely his, and that if he didn't want to enroll, it wasn't a bad idea to live there. Park also mentions that even if he does enroll, becoming a student would be quite difficult, and Jang says that at least it wasn't too expensive. He says that if he needed credit, he would find a way, and as he puts on his glasses, he mentions that he would transfer to that university right away. We then fast forward a few hours later and see several people gathered in front of the lecture hall. It's possible to see a group of hybrids talking amongst themselves about the classes. Jang is standing there, feeling lost, thinking that he had just transferred and felt like he was in a normal university. Remembering how Park had explained everything, he feels grateful because the girl really helped him. She can explain how all the classes were predetermined and all he had to do was choose between 3 different classes. With the schedule in his hand, the boy begins to look at the options to see which one he would choose. Looking through the courses, the boy starts to wonder what was wrong with them, as for a moment he thought he had grabbed the wrong schedule. He sees a course called Understanding the Nest, and it seemed to be the only good class. Stu-chan also notices that the person leading that class was Professor Madoyan, and he seemed like a good person, so it was a good idea. Decided, our protagonist tells himself that he will enroll in that course. The boy is only slightly disappointed because there were so many people gathered to register for the classes. He recalls that normally he would just go to an internet cafe to register, and it would be a much simpler task. Suddenly, While lost in thought, a girl passes by him, grabbing another guy by the neck and throwing him to the ground. Seeing this scene, Jang wonders what was happening and why those two were fighting. The woman calls the blonde boy an idiot and says that she told him not to show his face around there again. The man asks what the hell the girl was doing and calls her a psychopath. Our protagonist thinks that these people are old enough for university, yet they're still fighting. Park passes by Soo-chan, telling him not to be scared since he'll be seeing a lot of that around there. She walks over to the two people fighting, grabbing the girl by the collar and throwing her away, doing the same to the blonde guy. The girl separates the fight, tossing the two hybrids aside. The people who were fighting fall to the ground after being thrown. Park goes up to the blonde guy, scolding him for fighting when the semester hadn't even started yet. The boy, looking at her, realizes that the girl was the class representative. Hearing this, Jang is extremely shocked, as he couldn't believe that girl was the department representative. Finally, the young man wonders to himself if he's in the same class as that girl and thinks that this will be his new school life. We see that there are 10 minutes left until the registration deadline. At that moment, Jang arrives in the classroom thinking that at least he wasn't late. As he watches everything happening there, the boy can only imagine that something was telling him his dream of having a normal school life wasn't going to happen. But as he looks at his notebook, he thinks that the most important thing is that he managed to complete his course registration. Soo-chan says that even if you're confident in your studies, if you mess up your routine and forget about important classes, you're screwed. So he had to take Professor Ma Do-hyeon's course to have a chance. In Professor Ma's office, the man is looking out the window when he senses someone's presence. We see that the old man who had spoken to Jang earlier is Professor Ji, and the man asks if May had enrolled a student. He responds that the boy was talking about Soo-chan and says that he heard the old man met him earlier today. Do-hyeon asks if Ji thinks the new student was able to register for the course without any problems. The man recalls the moment he met the boy and sighs, smiling afterward. Then he says there was no way the boy managed to do that. We then see that our protagonist is extremely confused while reading the course registration terms. He notices that it had already begun, and suddenly, everyone in the room starts running. Jang wonders where all those people were going and what happened to the class registration. Professor Ji finishes his sentence saying that this is how registration works at that school. Finally, Jae states that only the strongest survive here, and we see Soo-chan at the window of the room, watching all the hybrids running in one direction. Our protagonist, seeing everyone running toward the forest, begins to question whether they were all crazy. All the hybrid students start using their insect abilities to reach a certain goal. Suddenly, someone enters the room and asks if Jang was the transfer student. The small boy says it seems like the young man didn't have time to hear the explanations. He then asks if it's okay to explain the registration process. After hearing that the goal of registration is to find the professor you want, Jang becomes irritated. The boy with him explains that at the nest, unlike standard processes, students have to find the hidden professor, and only then can they register for classes. The professor gives the first 16 students a flash drive, and only when the flash drive is inserted into the notebook can you register for the classes. Soo-chan, realizing that he was running out of time, panics, and the boy next to him asks if he at least already chose the professor he wanted. Jang replies that he did, and that he wanted to take classes with Professor May because he heard that his classes were the best. Finally, the boy also mentions that his goal is to become one of the top students in the department. Hearing this, the small boy says that it will be a tough road, and is impressed. The boy says that he's also going to start looking for the professor he wants and wishes Jang good luck, who also thanks him for the information. Our protagonist realizes that quite some time has passed since registration started, and he's already late. However, while walking through the forest, he says that he at least wanted to know in which direction everyone had gone to figure out where to look. But as he thinks about it, the boy seems to get an idea. The boy takes off his jacket and then uses his wings to fly into the sky. He thinks that from up there, he could clearly see where all those people were heading. Jang sees that scattered across the mountains, there were several flags, and he assumes that they were probably the destinations the students were supposed to reach. The boy also comments that if this were true, the professors would be at the flags. However, he notices that in the middle of the crowd, many people were starting to fight each other. He doesn't understand why, but assumes that it's probably happening because of registration. Still, Jang thinks that doing all that for registration is a bit excessive. Soo-chan then supposes that he should take action quickly, as he now knew that the flags were the destinations. The issue was that he didn't know which flag Professor Mo was at. However, he notices something and immediately starts heading in a certain direction. At Destination A, Professor May is just sitting, having a cup of coffee. Soo-chan arrives there, but during his landing, he crashes into the ground. The boy laments his failed landing and explains that he couldn't keep his eyes open while flying so fast, but at least his guess was right. Indeed, Professor Mo was in the direction everyone was heading. As he gets up, he thinks that the truth is that a good professor is very valuable in a competition, which is why everyone was going there. Jang thinks that even with a late start, he was able to use his dragonfly abilities exceptionally well. Immediately after, the professor says that he was impressive and explains that this was the flash drive needed for him to register for the classes. The man also says that Jang barely made it, as that was the last flash drive he had. Finally, Ma says that all he has to do is return to the classroom and insert the flash drive. Holding it, Jang thinks that he must complete the registration successfully, as he had taken the first step toward becoming human again. Several students arrive in front of the professor, and he delivers the sad news that the flash drives are gone. Professor May then pulls out his phone while saying that now that he's given out all the flash drives, it's time to start. He taps something on his phone, and suddenly, Su-chan receives a notification on his smartphone. Taking out his phone, the young man notices that he received a list of all the students who had the flash drives for that class. Jun, who was lounging in a hammock, also saw the notification and became excited that the new transfer student had managed to get a flash drive. However, as he laughs, the man remarks that Su-chan must have realized by now that the class registration wasn't over yet. We then see that even Park received the notification and noticed that the transfer student had gotten the flash drive too. However, several ill-intentioned people also received the notification and started plotting. Our protagonist, while staring at his phone screen, realizes what's happening, but it's already too late. He sees something behind him and feels someone approaching. One of the hybrid students with extreme strength tries to attack the boy but misses and hits a tree instead. The muscular student continues trying to land several blows on Jang, who keeps dodging. We then see that the attacker was a human-beetle hybrid with longhorn beetle characteristics, an insect known for its incredible strength. Su-chan starts running for his life and wonders why that man was doing this, but the beetle tells him to give up the flash drive. Another hybrid appears, half-whip spider, and attempts to attack Jang. As he continues dodging all the attacks, the boy realizes they were after him, hungry for the flash drive. The young man starts to fly, questioning why this registration process even exists. Someone starts shouting that Jang should go that way, and as he listens, he realizes it's the boy who helped him earlier. All the students continue chasing Su-chan, trying to take the flash drive from his hand. The boy with the bowl haircut notices that all the students ran past, and Jang celebrates being alive. Su-chan thanks the boy for his help again, saying he feels relieved to have found such a nice guy like him. Shai, the small boy, begins to say that what Jang is talking about is nonsense, and then suddenly touches the protagonist's head. The boy injects something into Jang's forehead, causing his entire body to become paralyzed. The young boy snatches the flash drive from our protagonist's hand and explains that it's honeybee venom, and Jang won't be able to move for a while. The little demon starts laughing at Jang, asking if he really thought he was going to get help. With a sinister expression, the bowl-cut boy states that everyone here is a competitor and no idiot helps their competition. He also mentions that letting the students fight among themselves so that only the strongest survive is the goal of the registration process. Finally, the boy says he'll make good use of the flash drive and Jang should try harder next time. But before leaving, the small boy remarks that people like our protagonist will never reach the top. Furious, Jang begins to pull the stinger from his forehead, saying that he won't become the top student if the flash drive is stolen by that kid, and that means he won't be able to drink the Cinderella serum. All of this results in him not being able to return to being a normal human, so our protagonist takes off into the sky. The little bee is impressed, realizing that the boy managed to overcome the effects of the venom. While laughing, he says there's nothing more Su-chan can do since he's slower because of the venom, and the boy shouldn't waste his energy, otherwise the venom will spread. Su-chan looks up and can only think that he must catch that kid at all costs. His eyes begin to glow green, and Jang realizes he can see a bee's movements and even predict where it's going. The narrator explains that the dragonfly, known as the Queen of the Hunt, has a 95% success rate. The secret lies in its eyes, which, shaped like a honeycomb, are made of thousands of lenses, allowing it to see any movement within 360 degrees. Using these eyes, the dragonfly can read the movements of its prey and predict its path while hunting. At that moment, Jang Su-chan mentally focused on hunting for the first time and identified his prey, and the dragonfly's thousands of eyes never lose sight of their target. Then, furious, Jang lands a solid punch right on the bee's jaw. After some time, we see someone connecting a flash drive to their notebook, and the notification that the registration was successfully completed appears on the screen. The person who did this was Park, who was wondering how much time was left until the registration process ended. The blonde, who had been involved in the fight earlier, asks the class representative if the guy she brought would be okay. He also says that, as Park knows, the number of people who want Professor Mei's flash drive is huge, and if he doesn't register in time, he'll end up on the waiting list. In her thoughts, the girl can only say that if Jang really wants to become the best student in the department, he'll have to give it his all. After the punch, the bee drops the flash drive, and Su-chan immediately notices. The boy rushes toward the object to catch it before it hits the ground. However, a hand appears, grabs the object, and quickly returns to the ground. Seeing this, our protagonist gets frustrated as that hybrid jumps in a direction and quickly leaves, stating that they'll make good use of it. Jang thinks he needs to catch that girl, but he realizes that the bee is still falling. The young man doesn't understand why the boy is still plummeting and thinks that if the bee hits the ground, they'll die from that height. Looking in the direction of the bowl-cut boy, our protagonist notices that the boy had fainted from just that punch. However, the girl who took the flash drive is getting further away. He tries to brush off the guilt, telling himself that the beast started that fight and he brought it on himself, so he should focus on his flash drive. Yet, as the boy is about to hit the ground, our protagonist manages to save him. Jang says to himself that he couldn't pretend he didn't see it because above all, he was still human. Su-chan leaves the unconscious boy on top of a tree and immediately goes after his target, realizing that he's lost sight of the thief. The young man starts to panic and grows exhausted, but tells himself that he must at least grab another flash drive. Our protagonist falls onto a tree and collapses to the ground. Lying on the ground, he says that his body isn't responding and it's probably the effect of the venom. The boy tells himself he won't die, but he still had to lower himself to this, all for registration. Determined, the boy thinks that he still needs to focus his mind, but he succumbs to the venom and passes out. After some time, Professor G approaches and calls Jang pathetic, ordering him to get up. Su-chan quickly wakes up and wonders how long he had been asleep. The boy realizes that the man in front of him is the same one he saw meditating. He begins to walk away and tells the boy to hurry up. He then mentions that the class registration period has ended, causing Jang's world to crumble. The professor says that, to be precise, there are still 5 minutes left, but there are likely no flash drives remaining. He says it's sad, but Jang should try again next year, although there's no guarantee the Cinderella serum will still be around by then. Frustrated, Su-chan states that he was attacked, had his flash drive stolen, and passed out because of the venom, and it wasn't fair. Jack calls the boy an idiot and asks if he got a screw loose. The man asks if Jang is saying he wants to be a special exception to redo his registration. Irritated, the man states that at this school, being the strongest is what matters most, and if Jang has a goal, he should fight to win and achieve it. The man also mentions that the professors were monitoring everything and were stepping in to prevent anything that posed a fatal threat. Jai informs him that jungle juice turned humans into weapons, giving them poisons, horns, claws, all because insects are full of dangerous traits. He then asks if our protagonist thought that in a school full of dangerous people, they would open a book and study. The old man remarks that if Su-chan wanted something like that, he should go to the civilian protection facility in the nest and live a peaceful life there. Ji throws a bag of chips at Jang and tells him that if he's not going to do anything, he should throw it away. Mocking the boy, the man says Su-chan should save the planet. Jang remains motionless, watching the man walk away. The boy comments that in the end, he didn't register for any class. He starts to recall the moment when his flash drive was stolen and says that if he had let that guy die, he would have been able to register. Calling himself trash, Jang says he didn't want to stay there thinking about these things. The young man prepares to throw the bag of chips on the ground, but remembers the professor's words not to forget to sort the trash. Irritated, the young man starts to open the bag of chips while thinking that he couldn't even register and still had to deal with this task. When he opens it, the boy notices that inside there is a mysterious flash drive. Jang then recalls the moment when the old man mentioned there were 5 minutes left until the registration deadline, and this gives him hope. Our protagonist looks toward the horizon and makes a decision. Elsewhere, Ma, while walking through the forest, encounters Professor Jai. The man remarks that he wouldn't have thought the old man would give a flash drive so directly, especially since he hated the student Su-chan. Finally, he asks if the old man had another reason for doing that. Jai explains that it's like the old saying, he would keep his friends close and his enemies even closer. Flying insanely fast, Jang starts to think that he doesn't have much time and is already getting close at this speed. But he could mess up the landing if he kept his eyes closed, so he couldn't go faster than that. However, suddenly the boy gets an idea and pulls out a pair of glasses from his jacket. Jang says that with these, dust and wind in his face would gradually be blocked, and so he could increase his speed, and our protagonist flies even faster. Some students are chatting, saying they don't understand why everyone is searching around the forest when they could just steal the flash drive in front of the school. One of them notices a guy coming and says that all the waiting will be worth it. The scary insects prepare to attack our protagonist, but Jang passes them in the blink of an eye. Everyone is extremely impressed, wondering who that guy is and why he's so fast. But without options, they start running in his direction. Chun Du-hua suddenly appears, knocking down all the insects who are running. The delinquent wonders who knocked him down, but when he looks ahead, he realizes something. Standing in front of him was the first-year student in the department, Cha Hai-sung, and the other first-year, Chun Du-hua, as well as Park. Park is thinking that after she finished registering, she received a message from Professor G, who gave her the task of helping the transfer student. The girl reflects that he's not the type to do these things and wonders what he wanted. At that moment, Su-chan finally arrives in the classroom and rushes toward his laptop. He quickly inserts the flash drive and starts typing to complete his registration. Finally, the class registration is completed, and he manages to enroll in the insect fighting practical course. Relieved to have succeeded, the boy sighs and says that even though these weren't the classes he wanted, it wasn't the time to be greedy. The boy remarks that if he works harder than the others, he could still become the best student, and none of that would matter. However, the young man notices something on his computer screen and wonders what it is. Our protagonist explains that after the process was over, he received a notification that the orientation would begin soon, so he headed to the classroom. But inside the school, something happened, and we see Jang being escorted outside by 2 security guards. They say that the area was restricted and only NES students and professors were allowed inside. Upon hearing this, Soo-chan tries to explain, saying that he's a student there. One of the guards says that if he's a student, he should show his ID. Suddenly, a feminine hand appears, holding Jang's student ID. The one holding it was Park, and the girl explains to the boy that his ID had just been issued. Inside the school, the boy asks Hee-jin if they were in the same class, and the girl explains that those classes suit his speed better. The girl says that since he didn't get into Professor May's classes, things might be tough, but the boy responds that he can still be a good student. Soo-chan, confidently, states that he hasn't given up yet. Park is impressed by that attitude and says that he's unexpectedly a guy with courage. After a while, we finally see her and Jang entering the auditorium where their classes will take place. Inside, several people begin to recognize our protagonist as the dragonfly guy from the YouTube videos. Everyone stares at Soo-chan, almost as if he were a celebrity, given how famous he has become. However, Cha-hai becomes extremely irritated, slamming the table. The boy, extremely angry, says that it was a mistake for Jang to show his wings so openly in front of people. Seong continues, saying that both he and the class representative suffered a lot while trying to diffuse public opinions about Soo-chan. Upon hearing this, Jang remembers the girl Hee-jin, who mentioned that they were hiding all traces of things related to hybrids. He then assumes that this is how things calmed down so quickly on his end. Looking at Park and Seon, the boy realizes that those guys were protecting him. Hee-jin tells our protagonist not to worry about the blonde guy, as Soo-chan was doing it to save a girl. Finally, the girl says that everyone there understands that. Park also adds that if it were her, she would have done the same thing. The girl further states that Soo-chan should be proud, and upon hearing this, Jang becomes extremely shy. Afterward, Hee-jin says her goodbyes as she had a little task to do first, and watching her leave, Jang realizes that his classmate is very kind. At the back of the room, a bully named Hyung-nim is smiling with an extremely malicious grin. Cha-hai becomes even more irritated, thinking that Hee-jin was siding with Jang just because he was a transfer student. Before he can continue his thoughts, Hyun appears behind him and slams the blonde's face into the table. He says it's a pleasure to meet his classmates, and Jang, watching this scene, becomes frightened. The muscular guy says that he wanted to say something when everyone gathered, but to do so, he would have to sit around doing nothing, and he didn't want that. Hyun comments that anyway he had a favorite ask, and suddenly several bullies enter the room. Finally, the jerk asks if everyone there could lend him the position of top student. The other students become extremely worried, trying to understand what was happening. Nim approaches one of them and says he really wanted the Cinderella serum, so he just needed help with one thing. While taking the student ID from one of the girls, the bully says he's going to confiscate the IDs of all the students this term. The guy explains that he's doing this because without their IDs, no one would be able to enter the classroom. The gang also starts stealing everyone's IDs. Jang becomes extremely irritated, calling it nonsense, and activates his wings. As he does so, he charges at the bully, declaring that he'll never give up his ID. The jerk, seeing a flying insect, underestimates Soo-chan's strength. Immediately after, one of his lackeys hits our protagonist square in the face with a bat. Later, we see the boy unconscious in a hospital bed. With a blow to the head, he begins to wake up, and in front of him, Park is explaining that this is the medical wing. The girl says that after finishing her task, she found Soo-chan bleeding, so she brought him there. Ignoring that, Jang remembers his ID, and when he checks his neck, he sees it has been stolen. Hee-jin tells him not to worry, as the school can always issue new IDs. Soo-chan feels extremely relieved and mentions that he was worried for nothing, and at that moment, Hee-jin says she'll go get the new IDs. With a serious expression, the girl says she'll be back soon, so Jang should rest there. The young man thanks her, thinking to himself that Hee-jin really is the department representative and is very kind and caring. Thinking about this, he also remembers Mai-hee, who was exactly like that and very concerned about others. Cha-hai, who was next to him, also starts to wake up, and Jang is surprised that he hadn't died. The blonde asks if something happened, as he passed out right after the blow, and Jang begins to explain. After hearing everything that happened, the guy becomes extremely irritated upon learning that their IDs were stolen. Jang tells him not to worry, as the representative went to get the new IDs. Seong calls Soo-chan an idiot and asks if he really believed that. The boy states that if being the top student was the goal, they could have stopped the competition for the top spot from continuing. Furthermore, not all IDs are issued in a day, so there was something more behind that plan. Realizing this, Jang realizes that Hee-jin is in danger and starts to think about the girl. Elsewhere, we see Park approaching the gang of bullies near a lake. When she gets there, the girl asks if the bullies have any intention of returning the IDs. Their leader says no, and at that moment, all the hybrid insects surround the girl. Hyung thinks that everything's going according to plan and he didn't really need the IDs, but he hoped Park would come to retrieve them. Finally, the boy thinks that his only goal from the beginning was to get the girl to come there, as he wanted to take down the top student of the first trimester. At that moment, the girl reacts by attacking one of the hybrids, and the other two try to defeat her. However, with extreme skill, Hee-jin jumps into the air and starts spinning. The leader of the thugs, seeing his companions being defeated, calls them idiots, and says they couldn't beat that girl on solid ground. Taking the IDs from around his neck, the boy threatens to throw them into the water. Park panics, trying to stop him, but the boy takes advantage. Nim starts to summon some claws from his back and declares that his enemy had entered his territory. He reveals himself to be a hybrid of the Velociraptor, the strongest predator among aquatic insects, and then he attacks Yi-Jin. The girl is thrown toward the water, falling into the lake. Taking advantage of this, Hyung also jumps into the river to defeat the girl. Hyung says that being the top student would be very easy without the girl around, and it would be too suspicious if he killed her on school grounds. The jerk grabs Yi-Jin by the neck and starts giving her a suffocating caress, saying that if she drowned, no one would ever know. The other hybrids, who were with their leader, start mocking Park, irritated with the girl. Nim says he should play with the girl before killing her since she was going to die anyway. However, in an absurd burst of speed, someone hits the half-hybrid insect. The leader's subordinates are extremely concerned, trying to figure out what just happened. After being freed from the guy's grip, Yi-Jin surfaces to catch her breath. The girl hears a familiar voice saying that no matter how much Hyung wanted to be a top student, he shouldn't lower his human standards. We then see that the one who saved the girl was Jang, who was calling Hyung a piece of trash. Hyung's subordinates realize that it was the flying insect they saw earlier. Nim mockingly asks if Jang was okay after taking that beating. Finally, he orders the boy to die and immediately tries to punch him in the chin. However, our protagonist easily dodges. With his eyes glowing, Jang thinks that this is just like last time, and once again he can see his enemy's movements. He dodges another blow and realizes that Hyung's moves weren't that fast. Against an opponent of this level, he could even win. However, Yi-Jin screams in desperation for Jang to back off, and at that moment, Nim grins maliciously. With one of his strange claws, the boy tries to attack the poor dragonfly boy. For some reason, Jang effortlessly evades the attack, flying backward with his wings. In the sky, he wonders why Yi-Jin interrupted his fight, and the girl responds that he couldn't do that because they were at a disadvantage. The girl explains that Kyung's insect is an aquatic type, and that place is perfect for him. Yi-Jin also warns that it'll be all over as soon as Nim grabs Jang and drags him into the water, which is why they need to leave the lake quickly. Once again, maliciously, Kyung raises the IDs high and asks if the two of them were planning to leave. Beside him, his subordinates also arrive to help him, and the boy says that if they want to leave, they could. Suchen becomes extremely irritated, as not only are they outnumbered, but they also want to fight in a place more advantageous to them. Yi-Jin pleads for the boy to leave, saying there's no need for him to fight as well. The girl says that the target of the delinquents is the top student of the first semester, and if they get what they want, they might return the IDs. Park also says that it was because of her that all the new students got dragged into this. Our protagonist replies that the girl shouldn't say that, as she herself had already said something about it. Smiling, the boy tells her that she's not alone. He repeats that it was her own words, and to be honest, there's one more thing. The boy reveals that he's not alone, and at that moment, Cha-hai appears behind one of Hyung's subordinates. The blonde quickly defeats two of his opponents with a few kicks. Without hesitation, he also charges at another, knocking him out instantly. It's revealed that he's a hybrid of the field cricket, and angrily, Seong declares that he's here to get his ID back. Hyung, seeing that the cricket had already recovered, becomes irritated, as he found him so annoying that he planned to deal with him after defeating the class representative. Before he can continue thinking about it, the bully notices Jang approaching, trying to recover the stolen IDs. With his claws, he declares that since Suchen made the mistake of getting too close, he should die, and immediately tries to attack the boy. With extreme skill, the boy keeps flying, trying to get the IDs while thinking that he just couldn't get caught. Frustrated, Nim realizes that Jang's movements aren't in a straight line like before, and that was because he now had more space to maneuver. Even so, he wonders how Suchen could fly so efficiently, then questions what kind of insect he was. Our protagonist, after dodging a blow, charges at his enemy to capture the IDs. He manages to evade the attacks and almost reaches the objects, and seeing this, Nim becomes even more irritated. But in reality, Jang reveals that he was using his dragonfly speed to hit his opponent with all his momentum, landing a full-force blow to the insect's jaw. The boy states that no matter how different they are in class, that should have been enough. However, before Hyung can lose consciousness, he regains himself and attacks Suchen, who realizes that the damage from his punch was reduced by half because of the water. Covering his face, Nim asks everyone to stop, saying there was no reason for them to be fighting. He claims that they should resolve the conflict through conversation and be honest with each other. The boy keeps spouting nonsense to distract them for some reason, while Sinong finishes off all of Nim's lackeys. Behind Park, something starts bubbling in the water. At that moment, one of Nim's subordinates appears, holding Yi-Jin by the neck. Park easily frees herself, but ahead of her, she doesn't notice that Hyung is charging at her, planning to kill her. However, before that can happen, our protagonist appears behind the insect, grabbing his claws. As he flies with him, the boy declares that Nim was no longer in the water. The young man begins flying with his opponent, pulling him by his claws, while stating that Hyung was no longer in his territory. It was now in his domain, so Jang slams the bully into the ground. The The boy crashes to the ground, instantly knocked unconscious, and Jang concludes that no matter how much he wanted the Cinderella serum, his methods were wrong. After recovering the IDs, the boy states that if Nim became a human who wasn't even worthy of being an insect, then it would all be for nothing. Time passes, and Su-chan explains that after all that, they recovered the IDs. When they returned to the auditorium, the orientation had already ended. The three returned the IDs to their classmates, but decided to keep it a secret that they were the ones who returned them. Jang also reports that Park insisted on keeping it a secret since everything had happened because of her, and she begged so much that it was hard to refuse. Our protagonist didn't get to attend the orientation or become a hero for returning the IDs, but he was happy because he had found a new home there. The boy mentions that his old home was a bit far, and now that he decided to apply for a place on campus, it wasn't a bad idea. However, there was one catch: he ended up becoming Seong's roommate. The blonde pats Su-chan on the shoulder and says that the boy was really cool during the earlier fight. Seong asks if the boy drinks, and Jang replies that he does a little. The young man notices someone entering the room, and when he looks back, he sees Hee-jin and her friend arriving with some drinks and food. The girl apologizes for entering without asking and says that they were planning a party for that day, and that it turned out Jang and Seong were roommates. In the end, she approaches our protagonist and asks if he's going to join them for drinks. In his head, Jang thinks that maybe it was because it had been a while since he had a drink, but after coming to this strange school, even after revealing his wings, he was having fun. Somewhere in the forest, outside the nest, something is happening. We see someone mentioning that Hyun failed to kill the professor's disciples, but it was okay because his main goal was to attract attention. A woman with a strange insect head says that despite this, those who fail in their hunt are eliminated. Nim tries to argue that he would do better next time and that he would manage to kill the class representative and get the Cinderella serum. However, the insect woman questions what he's talking about since they don't need anything like the Cinderella serum. She then jumps from the tree and approaches Hyun to put an end to him. After a bloodbath, the woman begins to leave the area, saying that not being able to defeat a rookie, despite all his strength, should be a source of shame. The girl starts removing the insect mask and states that he shouldn't worry, as the boss will be satisfied because they found what they were looking for. We then cut to two guards standing in front of a door. The next day, we see the auditorium of the Department of Insect Benefits. Jang is thinking that this is his first class, so he's curious about what will be taught. Hee-jin, who is next to him, tells the boy not to be so scared since today is the first class and they said it would only be a basic test. The girl also says that there will be things he won't know, but promises to help. So Jang feels happy as he thinks he shouldn't be nervous just because it's his first class. She violently enters the room, demanding the attention of all his students and stating that they will be doing a simple test. As he activates a chainsaw, the man declares that the test results will reflect in their grades and they could also die, so they should be aware of that. Seeing the situation, Jang becomes completely disbelieving and extremely scared. We then see some students gathered in the open training field of the University of the Nest. Our protagonist is running frantically while Professor G chases him with a chainsaw. The boy just wants to understand why that old man is trying to kill him. Seong explains to Jang that the old man is Professor Jun Ji, one of the main teachers in the department. Beside him, Park also says that practical insect combat is one of the mandatory courses for graduation, and Jay teaches them to fight using their insect abilities, because it's their responsibility to fight against predators, like the mantis from the cinema. The professor declares that all of this was explained during orientation yesterday, but the three of them didn't show up. Jun explains that insect abilities are like weapons, and some human insects use these abilities to commit various crimes. Jay also says that, as he mentioned, only the strongest will survive, and Jang will have to do better if he wants to earn the Cinderella serum. Holding the chainsaw, the professor declares that the first test will be a game of hide and seek. Everyone must run away using their insect abilities, and anyone caught will fail the course, and graduation will be out of the question. Before Su-chan can think much about it, she lunges to attack the boy, who barely dodges. The boy tries to understand how the man expects them to learn to fight while running away. Jang remembers that even when he was attacked by the mantis, running was the only thing he could do. Seong is also dodging Ji while wondering why the old man is so fast. The boy is about to be hit by the chainsaw, but his friend Su-chan manages to pull him out of the way. Seeing this, Jai realizes that our protagonist is using the compound vision of the dragonfly and is likely analyzing the movements of the chainsaw. Jun then takes a swing, commenting that for someone who came here just to get rid of his wings, Su-chan seems to be getting quite comfortable with his abilities. The professor also remarks that Jang is practically already a real dragonfly. However, upon hearing this, Su-chan remembers the moment when Mai-hee called him a monster. The professor, meanwhile, tries to grab the boy, saying that this is no time to daydream and that he's going to fail. However, fortunately for him, Park manages to save our protagonist, preventing him from being attacked. The girl tells the boy to stop getting lost in his thoughts or he'll fail the moment he's caught. She also orders Seong to do something, and at that moment, the boy starts running toward Ji. Seong dodges one of the professor's attacks, sliding across the ground. Immediately after, he kicks the dirt, launching a clump of mud in the old man's direction. The professor deflects the mud and warns his student to be careful with his tactics. However, he notices that he's now surrounded by a smoke screen. The three continue discussing but don't stop running, and Su-chan thinks that for now, he should keep fleeing. At the University of the Nest in the underground isolation sector, the hybrid woman from the previous day had just defeated some guards. The one is heading toward the mantis who attacked our protagonist a few days ago. She asks if the assassin is still alive, and the man is surprised by the sound of her voice. The girl wonders how people could be so cruel to a living creature. Then she uses Hyung's ID but says she really wanted to get the mantis out of prison as soon as possible. However, a student ID wouldn't get through security. The girl assures the assassin not to worry because she brought something that would help him with that. At that moment, we see the small half-B boy arriving with a security card from the faculty office, saying it was easy to get. The girl starts praising and patting the boy, thanking him for the card. However, the half-B begins to question why he stole the professor's security card. He realizes that he doesn't even know the woman and wonders how he ended up there. The half-insect girl tells the bee not to worry about anything and then opens the door where the mantis was imprisoned. The man starts to emerge, wondering why those two half-humans were in front of him. The psychopath declares that the scent of those creatures is delicious. The woman holding the half-bee in her arms says that the mantis is exactly as her boss described him. She throws the small boy toward the assassin, saying that it's a little gift for him. Without hesitation, the psychopath goes to end the poor boy's life, while the boy begs for it not to happen. The girl just watches as the poor boy is torn apart by the mantis, and with a frightening expression says it's fascinating. We then return to Jang, who after running for an hour, is extremely out of breath and irritated. He asks his friends what kind of stupidity this was. Seon comments to his friends that the professor had already captured most of the students while they were running away. Jang wonders if all those people are going to fail the course, and Park responds that they probably will since Professor Jai is a man of his word. Extremely frustrated, the protagonist can only think that this is more like a boot camp than a school. Su-chan starts to lament that he could have taken his spot in Professor Mi's course, and trying to change his mind, Park reminds him that the class would end in an hour. Jang then asks if Jun is trying to make everyone fail, and Yijin explains that this is just his way of teaching. At that moment, Seong asks everyone to be quiet because he's coming. Our protagonist notices two girls running and one of them falls to the ground. Her friend tries to help her up but realizes that the girl has twisted her ankle, and at that moment, Jun is already catching up to them. The green-haired girl tries to explain that her friend hurt her ankle, but the professor doesn't care and tells them to keep moving. The girl refuses to accept that answer, but the man responds that whether someone twists their ankle or has their leg cut, it doesn't matter. Because either way, you must keep running or it will result in your death, and that's the reality of insects. Jun then asks what his students are waiting for, as he has already said they're going to die, and he prepares to attack them with a chainsaw. However, it's Jang who stops the attack by grabbing Jun's weapon. The man asks what his student is doing, and the boy demands that he stop as it's an exaggeration. Su-chan also says that it's only the first day of class and the professor is taking things way too far. The old man disagrees, saying that if this were a real combat situation, they would have been dead a long time ago, and asks if Jang thinks that kind of talk works with predators. Jun comments that he made it clear that Jang would fail if he got caught, but since he has courage, they'll make a deal. He says that if Jang can land a hit on him before class ends, he won't fail the two girls or any of his classmates. But if Su-chan can't hit him, he and his two friends hiding in the bushes will be expelled. Finally, Jun concludes that now is not the time for Jang to worry about others, as he still has a long way to go. The man also tells the boy that he has ability and needs to truly understand it. At that moment, deep in the forest, the mantis starts searching for something. The insect woman asks what the problem is, as her boss doesn't like waiting. The man says he's smelling something delicious nearby and recognizes the scent. He declares that he recognizes the smell as belonging to the dragonfly he had encountered before. Back with Jang, Professor Jun tells him that he knows the boy came here to get rid of his wings, but without those powers, he would never survive. Our protagonist then activates his dragonfly wings and backs away, thinking that Ji will pass everyone if he can land just one hit on him, but will expel him if he fails. However, confident, the young man believes it will be easy, and that he just needs to hit him once. Su-chan quickly charges at his professor, trying to punch him, but the old man dodges and states that it's clear his student has never thrown a punch before. With authority, the professor says that at that speed, Jang will never be able to catch a single insect. Jang, without hesitating for a moment, keeps trying to land a punch on the professor, who easily dodges and mocks the boy. Seong, watching the scene, comments that it seems Professor Ji isn't going to go easy on him. However, Park, standing next to him, tells the boy to wait because Su-chan still has a chance. At that moment, Jun realizes that his student is using the compound vision of the dragonfly. Jia also notes that Jang is identifying him as his prey, but the boy doesn't know it yet. After much effort, our protagonist manages to grab the professor's shirt and prepares to punch him. But with an extremely fast move, Ji immobilizes the boy and slams him to the ground. Everyone around watching the scene is shocked by the professor's extreme proficiency. Irritated, the old man asks if Jang expected his prey to stand still, waiting for him to attack. Lying on the ground, defeated, Jang can only think that he wasn't even close to hitting the old man. In his head, Su-chan wonders if the professor is using his insect ability and what kind of insect he might be. Knowing what his student is thinking, the man says that he cannot use his insect abilities. He explains that he too was a human infected by jungle juice, but his abilities come with side effects and his body can't handle them at his age. Jun also says that's why he always carries a weapon for personal defense and shows off his chainsaw. Finally, he declares that his point is that Jang is young and has nothing holding him back. In theory, he could defeat an old man, but something is stopping him. While he speaks, a dragonfly is thrown toward Jang and lands on the boy's jacket. The young man screams in fear, and the professor explains that it's just a toy. The old man then concludes his theory, saying that the reason Jang isn't evolving is because of his repulsion, and that repulsion he has toward insects is what's limiting his ability. She asks what Su-chan knows about dragonflies and if he has any knowledge of the peculiarities of that insect. The man also mentions that his student needs to understand his abilities to use them, but before that, he must accept the fact that he is an insect. Upon hearing these words, our protagonist remembers that he's hated insects for as long as he can remember and hated them even more because he didn't want to face the fact that he had become one. That's why he couldn't simply accept it, as no one could easily accept the fact that they had become a monster. Suddenly, someone starts clapping while stating that it truly was a brilliant lesson. Jun and Jang turn to see who is speaking. The woman with the insect head declares that Professor Jin always had a certain talent. For some reason, the old man seems to recognize the figure, and the woman starts giving a speech about how inspiring the lesson was. She also says it was very moving, but suddenly she strikes the girl with the injured ankle with her tail. Jang, seeing the girl's blood splatter toward him, is paralyzed. Upon seeing this, Seong loses control and charges at the woman. However, the woman says that wasn't nice and then uses her tail to inject something into the blonde's chest. The young man begins to feel his body paralyzed and realizes it's poison. As Seong falls, it's the insect woman who catches him, starting to caress his face. She says that Seong will make a nice little snack, and at that moment, Jang snaps out of his shock, wondering what is happening. The woman declares that she already fed someone with the student along the way, but apparently, he had a very demanding appetite. Upon hearing this, our protagonist begins to feel a crushing pressure and thinks that it's happening again. He sees the mantis arm piercing Professor Jun, and the boy thinks that the same sensation from that day at the cinema is happening again. The same images and feelings of helplessness are overwhelming him. And watching his professor collapse unconscious, Jang declares that even the same kind of shivers are hitting him. Once again, Su-chan sees that psychopathic mantis with a terrifying expression, stating how happy he is to see his prey. And finally, Jang concludes that he recognizes that feeling is absolute fear. Feeling the crushing pressure, Park thinks that the mantis seems different compared to the day at the cinema. She assumes the insect has likely recovered after feeding, so the insect woman tells the assassin that it's enough and that they need to leave. The mantis picks up Seong in his arms, and before leaving, the insect woman bids farewell to the people present. Before departing, she asks Ji to take care of himself and hopes they meet again. Finally, as she removes her insect mask, she calls the old man "Dear Professor." Park tries to stop her from escaping, but her professor grabs her arm, telling her to stop. The man says that they are too dangerous and she cannot fight strangers without the nest's permission, and they should wait for the school to handle it. Heejin shouts that this is not the time to worry about rules since they could lose the chance to save their friend. The girl also says that if they arrive too late, Seong might not be alive anymore. However, Jun counters that school rules must be followed, and as long as Park is a student of the nest, there's nothing she can do. Defying this, Jang activates his wings and flies above Jun. The boy says, just to clarify, that his professor had said he would be expelled if he lost the bet. So he doesn't need to worry about the stupid rules anymore, as he's no longer a student there. Without hesitation, Su-chan flies in the direction his friend was taken, ignoring whatever his professor had to say. As he flies, the boy reflects that he froze out of fear of the mantis and just stood there watching as they took Seong away. Jang comments that his friend wasn't perfect, but was incredibly kind. And yet, he had let him down by allowing fear to take control of his body. Now everything depended on him, so he had to capture those insects. Jun, seeing that his student has left, calls the boy a stupid idiot and remarks that he taught him how to flee, not how to fight. In his thoughts, he explains that survival is never guaranteed for any creature in a world where the strong eat the weak, because even an insect has its predator. That was what he was trying to teach, as Jang should know how to run away from an opponent he couldn't defeat. The worst part is that for dragonflies, mantises are the worst kind of opponent. They are literally their natural enemy. Back with our protagonist, the boy is closing in on his enemy, but the assassin notices and says it was a good attempt, but not good enough. The man then turns in Jang's direction, stating that he sensed the boy approaching from a kilometer away. Jang narrowly dodges an attack from the mantis, and in his head, he can only tell himself that there's nothing to fear. Still, the boy admits he stands no chance against the sharp claws of his enemy, so his plan is to keep his distance in the air. And when the time is right, he'll strike his opponent. After dodging a certain blow, the boy manages to slip in and land a solid punch on the assassin's jaw. However, the man with a terrifying expression seems unfazed and comments that it didn't hurt. With his hand throbbing in pain and injured, Jang pulls away from the fearsome creature. The young man notes that the mantis's skin is as hard as stone, and at that moment, the assassin explains that his exoskeleton is now functioning since he's finally fed. He then imposingly declares that Su-chan will be his snack for the journey. Seeing that psychopath coming toward him, the boy realizes that with just one punch, he felt in his bones that he could never defeat this monster. Trying to defend himself in any way possible from the mantis attacks, Su-chan says that even if he can't, he'll try even if it results in his death. The insect woman urges the mantis to hurry and kill the dragonfly since they need to leave. Seong, who is unconscious, is having a strange dream, hearing someone calling his name and wondering who it is. The boy remembers a moment when he was bullied by some thugs. However, once again, a voice calls out, telling him to wake up, and the boy awakens. We see that the one calling him is Jang, who is completely wounded from his fight with the mantis. Seong, who is paralyzed, begins to wonder what was happening right in front of him. Seeing this, the insect woman can't believe that the boy had already recovered from the effects of the poison and supposes that he probably has some kind of super strength ability. Without mercy, the woman declares that she will personally kill Cha, as dead or alive, he's still just a pile of flesh. As the stinger comes toward him, the blonde can only think that his body is still numb, which is why he can't move. Before he can witness his friend's death, Jang intervenes, taking the hit from the wasp's stinger. He says he'll buy some time and asks his friend to run away immediately. Seeing his friend bravely fighting against those people, Seong wonders how a rookie could throw himself into danger like that just to save a stranger. Shahai remembers the previous day when he had a conversation with Jang about the boy saving Park and that girl at the cinema. Seong assumes that Su-chan liked them. The blonde tells his friend that it's not common for someone to want to help a random stranger like that. Then our protagonist explains that he's not sure why he did it, and even though he didn't receive any thanks, he never regretted it. Back to reality, the blonde sees the mantis about to finish off Jang, and remembering that his friend said he saved those people because it was the right thing to do, he feels inspired. Seong makes a decision. He grabs Su-chan by the collar of his jacket and begins running insanely fast, fleeing the scene. The insect woman, seeing this, wonders how that person got away so quickly. The mantis, watching the scene, realizes that Seong was leaping several meters in a single step. Then the narrator explains that grasshoppers are often portrayed as lazy creatures and katydids are commonly mistaken for grasshoppers. However, none of them are lazy, and katydids are particularly diligent predators, as both species possess the long, fast hind legs of the Orthoptera order. They use these legs to jump while hunting their prey, and a single kick from these legs propels a katydid high into the air, easily jumping distances 10 times the length of their bodies, and that's what was happening now. As Seong carries his friend away, he asks Jang if getting his butt kicked like that was his definition of doing the right thing. With a smile, the boy declares that Su-chan is the biggest fool he's ever known. Back with the predators, the insect woman tells the mantis that it's no use chasing them anymore and that they should leave. The psychopath replies, no, thinking that he can still smell his prey nearby and for some reason, he can still track them. He even realizes that for some reason, the two aren't running away. A few meters ahead, now safe, Seong asks if Jang really wants to go back and fight the mantis, wondering if he's lost his mind. The boy states that when you meet an opponent you can't defeat, you have to flee, and Su-chan is too injured to fight. However, our protagonist responds that he knows that monster isn't like those idiots from the lake. It could even be killed. But that's exactly why they have to stop the mantis. Jang explains that if they let that monster escape, sooner or later he'll go after someone else. Someone innocent and defenseless who will be killed by that insect. Seong agrees and asks how they can defeat such a creature, and Jang replies that reinforcements will arrive soon and they just need to keep the enemies busy. With a confident expression, the boy declares that he has a plan. Back where they were, Ji Park is treating a professor's wound, wondering what to do. The girl tells herself that she's very worried, and although she wants to go after her friends, she can't leave the professor like this. Suddenly, a gust of wind blows through the area as if someone had passed by at extreme speed. The girl wonders what that was as she feels someone has passed by her, and Jun, despite his injuries, seems to understand the situation. Far away, the insect woman says that those two are probably far away by now and tells the mantis not to be sad. The man, trying to track his prey, realizes that for some reason, the scent is coming toward him at high speed. He turns around and sees our protagonist with some vines ready to tie up the insect woman. The woman is caught by the neck and immediately pulled backward. The psychopath begins to wonder how that boy arrived so quickly and asks what trick Jang had up his sleeve. In the blink of an eye, Su-chan manages to tie the insect woman to a treaty so she can't interfere. Before the mantis can ask anything, Jang charges at him, kicking his chin. Taking the hit, the mantis tells his enemy that it still isn't enough to hurt him. With his leg aching, Jang thinks that this guy is too tough and that he needs to find a way to deal some damage. However, before Su-chan can think further, the psychopath quickly prepares to attack him. As he slashes multiple times toward his prey, a man declares that he's the strongest predator in the food chain and that no insect can defeat him. During this, we see Jang's plan, which involves distracting the mantis by flying around him to keep him occupied. This is where Seong's legs come in, as the boy would run as fast as he could and bring that thing. And at that moment, the cricket kicks something toward Jang. Back where Park is, Jin is complaining that someone took something and the girl is confused, trying to understand what he's saying. The old man states that he'll let it slide for now since he never thought they would grab it right under his nose. Back at the battle, our protagonist flies into the sky and grabs the object Seong had kicked. Cha-hai, out of options, says that he got the object his friend asked for. He then tells Jang to tear the mantis to pieces. Without hesitation, Su-chan charges at his predator with his professor's chainsaw. In nature, it's commonly known that a dragonfly can't be a mantis. But that's only true when it comes to insects, and in this moment, we see our protagonist advancing with a chainsaw. The young man then delivers an attack with the weapon, managing to slice off one of his enemy's arms. Here things are different, as humans always find a way. The assassin begins roaring in pain as he loses his arm. Immediately after his remaining arm, he slashes wildly at nothing. Backing away from their opponent, Seong and Jang are impressed that they actually cut off the mantis' arm. Irritated, the psychopath charges at them, questioning how those insects dare attack him. To defend himself, our protagonist raises the chainsaw in front of him. The monster relentlessly tries to attack Jang, who is struggling to withstand the blows. Stu-chan notices something he didn't want to see. His chainsaw had been destroyed. The mantis takes advantage of the opportunity, attempting another strike, saying that Jang is nothing without that weapon. Meanwhile, the boy keeps flying in the air, thinking that with the chainsaw destroyed, he has no way to attack without it. Seong appears behind the psychopath, kicking him in the head and declaring that the mantis can't beat them with just one arm. However, at that moment, the assassin turns around, ready to land a full strike on the blonde's face with his claw. The narrator explains that having a natural enemy is nature's cruel way of regulating the ecosystem, a solution to restrict the uncontrolled reproduction of any species. A creature that can end life with a single blow is the worst kind of opponent, and we see Cha-hai barely managing to defend himself from the attack. Furious, Jang charges at the mantis to save his friend, but he doesn't realize it's a trap, and the assassin manages to grab the dragonfly's body. With a terrifying expression, the man says he'll finally get a taste of that flesh. He declares that this is a worthy hunt, while Jang thinks that he can't escape and that everything he did was useless against his enemy. Seeing the assassin's teeth closing in to devour him, the boy can only think that he doesn't want to die like this. Suddenly, someone arrives on the scene and a huge explosion occurs. The mantis is hit and sent flying, and the person who appeared is recognized by our protagonist. Jet, for some reason healed, remarks that Jang had been feeling all-powerful and victorious just moments ago, but now he's fallen, and that's pathetic. Confused, Su-chan asks what happened, as his professor seems to have recovered from his injury. The man tells the boy not to worry about it, saying that he received treatment from the nest. Jun mentions that there's a remarkable individual who heals wounds instantly, so he just followed Seong's tracks to get there. Jet also says he was worried that his students were already dead, but is relieved to see that they managed to hold off the monster. In his mind, the old man remarks that he can't believe a newly transferred student managed to survive for so long, even against his worst natural enemy. That's why the old man declares that Jang has earned the right to witness a demonstration from him. He then tells the assassin that he was caught off guard earlier and that won't happen again. Underestimating his opponent, the psychopath moves toward the old man, intending to feed on him. Smoke starts coming from Jun's arm as he tells the assassin that he will pay for ruining his first class of the semester, not to mention putting a hole in his body. As he sees the psychopath approaching, the old man comments that the monster will pay with his life. Witnessing this, Su-chan is extremely confused, wondering why smoke is coming from his professor's arm. It's then explained that Jun is a hybrid of the bombardier beetle, and this insect, fittingly named, possesses a phenomenal ability. When in battle with its natural enemy, the bombardier beetle creates a chemical reaction inside its body, and the heat from this reaction is directed at its opponent. This results in a violent explosion, and on a human scale, it's much larger. Jun triggers this reaction in his arm and charges toward the psychopath. This was the ultimate defense mechanism, and after a swift motion, Jun unleashes an explosion on the mantis. The blast is powerful enough to burn even the trees behind the assassin, leaving him charred. The old man says that now Jang has seen it with his own eyes. That's the example of the jumbo juice effect, a complex insecta, or simply known as complex, that is the true power each one possesses. Upon hearing this, Su-chan assumes that complex is the name given to insect abilities in humans. He also realizes that it was a massive explosion, strong enough to defeat the mantis with a single blow. The boy remembers when his professor said he didn't use his abilities due to the side effects, and as he snaps back to reality, he notices Ji's hand trembling. Seeing that his student has noticed this, the man tells him that this will also happen to Jang. The old man explains that those side effects result from reckless use of the complex, and he overused his abilities before fully understanding their power. This could happen to Jang too, so the only way to prevent it is for Su-chan to truly master his power as soon as possible. A few hours later, Su-chan reflects that everything ended quickly, and they return to campus safe and sound. Well, more or less, as he and Seong are both completely battered and lying in hospital beds. The two friends talk for a while, marveling at how it was a miracle they made it out alive and that, on top of it all, they won't be expelled or fail the course. Our protagonist still feels bothered by one thing, which is that the masked woman who freed the mantis escaped. He recalls Heejin assuring him that capturing the mantis was more than enough, but deep down he knew he was helpless and alone. Looking at some research on dragonflies, the boy comments that he understands what the professor means. He needs to master his complex so he can use it effectively. Later that night, Jang is seen in a deep sleep, but Cha Hai is no longer by his side. For some reason, the boy is up, completely in a trance. It's revealed that the stinger from that insect woman is still in his neck. Deeper within the forest, we see the boy walking in a certain direction. He soon reaches the woman, and it's revealed that she's a hybrid of a jewel wasp, an insect capable of zombifying its targets. The woman speaks to Seong, who is still in a trance, saying he has no idea how evil the people of the nest really are, as they are hypocrites and liars. While gripping the blonde's neck, the girl also comments that they aren't protecting all human insects, as the nest cannot protect anyone. Suddenly separating the two, Jun arrives at the scene. The man declares that he knew the girl would return soon since she wants to destroy everything he's trying to protect, which is why he pretended not to notice the stinger in his student's neck. He also says that no matter what miserable scheme the girl has, he will do whatever it takes to protect his students from it. That's why he hopes he can knock some sense into his former student, Gaeun Sin. During this event, it's revealed that someone is watching from the bushes. Our protagonist, who is hiding, thinks to himself that he followed Seong there because he was worried, as his friends seemed to be sleepwalking. But watching that scene, he didn't understand what was happening. Jin comments to his former student that it has been a long time, approximately 5 years, since she left the field. Jang, seeing this, realizes that the woman was probably a former student of the nest. Gaeun Sin, with a strange expression, says that she knows her professor didn't come there just to chat. The woman remarks that it wasn't the perfect moment for them to have a conversation. While stretching, the old man says he was just trying to be polite with a former student of his, but since she wanted it, they could get straight to it, and suddenly, the man begins using his complex. He creates an explosion aimed at the woman, but she barely manages to dodge it. The man comments that his student will return with him to the nest after gaining some sense. Sin mocks her professor, saying it's much better this way since he's being honest, but even so, he's being a bit rough. Irritated, Jun questions how she had the audacity to say that after killing 2 students and 8 nest staff members. As he charges toward the woman, the man states that she better have a great reason for doing such things. He unleashes his complex against her once more. This time, however, his ability hits some trees, shattering them to pieces. In the air, the woman says her professor shouldn't be so upset over such trivial matters. And just as she's about to strike him with her stinger, she declares that she's only getting started. Jay manages to turn and defend himself from the attack immediately. The woman, as a defense, backs away from the man. Suddenly, another person arrives on the scene, declaring that it's enough. It's revealed that this person is Professor Meh. The man says it's a pleasure to meet Miss Sin. However, he adds that she's caused enough trouble already, and nest security will arrive at any moment, meaning she's in danger. Jun questions what Professor Meh is saying, and the man whispers that the woman is working for someone she calls boss. He suggests that it would be smarter to let her go and follow her tracks to find the real culprit, since she's capable of causing more casualties. Sin begins to hear multiple people approaching and realizes she should retreat at that moment. So Gaeun warns Ma and Jun not to forget, as the next time she's there, she will kill each one of them. Finally, the woman says goodbye and several soldiers arrive on the scene to put out the fire. Jai and Mei sigh in relief that no more casualties occurred. Professor Mei comments to his colleague that he understood Sin was his student, but he shouldn't have come there with those injuries. The man says that nest security will follow Miss Sin, so they should leave and return to campus. However, the professor states that Jun should first have a conversation with his current student. It's then revealed that Suchan is carrying Seong and reveals his presence to the professors. As they walk back to the nest, our protagonist asks if Seong will be okay, and Jun replies that he will. An awkward silence falls over the group for some reason during a trip. The old man breaks it, telling his student he would appreciate it if he could keep what he saw earlier a secret. Jun comments that Gaeun Sin was once his student, and that she left the school after a certain incident 5 years ago. The man also says that he hadn't heard about her until that day, but it seems Sin has returned to destroy the nest and its students. Jay states that the students will panic if they find out about her, so he'll reveal it at the right time. However, Suchan responds that he can't do that for free. He steps in front of his professor and says that, in exchange for keeping the secret, he wants to learn how to master his complex. The young man states that he has thought a lot about what his professor said about accepting the fact that he's an insect and how he needs to stop being disgusted by it. Suchan says he doesn't think it will be easy, but he felt utterly useless watching the villains take Seong away without being able to help. That's why he wants to be stronger, even though he doesn't know how. He knows his professor can teach him. Jun, seeing his student wanting to make a deal with him, is incredulous. The old man thinks to himself that he likes the courage of this kid and will help him, so he tells the boy to get ready. A few days later, many people are seen having lunch in the student cafeteria of the nest. As he eats, Seong mentions that he woke up in a hospital bed but found several leaves on his clothes, which was strange. Heejin notices something and realizes that her friend Dowa is in the cafeteria. Suchan recognizes Dowa as the Scorpion Girl and asks why she doesn't attend classes, and Park explains that she is part of the class dealing with special circumstances. Park explains that the jungle juice is what turned them into human insects, but some people received arthropod DNA, and the nest is conducting research on them. Some students assist with this research by going to the laboratories instead of attending classes and participating in various tests. However, Dowa will be joining the class starting that day. Suddenly, our protagonist wonders what type of insect Park is, since the only insect-like feature she has are her antennas. The girl responds that if he really wanted to know, it's something similar to a mantis. Hearing this, our protagonist shudders. He thinks to himself that he isn't surprised considering how strong she is. At that moment, Dowa approaches their table. Kicking Seong, she announces that she's back. Taking the seat where the blonde was sitting, the girl comments that starting from that day, group projects are officially back. Our protagonist asks what that means, and Park explains that first-year group combat projects change every week and aren't difficult. But sometimes, students have to face real combat with problematic human insects. Thinking about this possibility, Suchan tells himself that he could use it as a chance to test what he's been learning from his professor every night. Park mentions that, speaking of which, Professor G has already placed them into groups. Heejin explains that their group will consist of Dowa, Chin, Seong, Cha, the transfer student Jang, and herself. Hearing this, Suchan feels extremely happy to be in the same group as Park and his other two friends, as they are all good in combat. Watching his three teammates heading out for coffee, the boy comments that it's the perfect combination. A few days later, a heavy storm descends upon the nest. Professor Jun is working out in the gym when someone rushes in, calling for him. An assistant states that there's an extremely serious emergency. The assistant explains that they just received information about the progress of Group A's project. After they located a target, two members engaged in a chase, and one of them died during the pursuit. It's then revealed that Group A is our protagonist group. Before this incident occurred in the classroom, Professor G was explaining the group project. Chun states that the group's objective is to leave the Nest campus and locate cans of power killers, or as they call it, jungle juice, and bring them back. Upon hearing this, our protagonist is quite surprised. Professor G continues his explanation, stating that they need to recover what caused the creation of human insects. J also explains that the pesticide that came out of nowhere with the slogan jungle juice wasn't a success due to limited marketing, but it did have a sizable consumer base. The Nest wasn't able to locate the company that produced it, but it was distributed by a small company called Natural Life, which went bankrupt shortly after selling the pesticide. As a result, everything about it remains a mystery. On the bright side, the company was located in Gangwon province, and the damage was limited to that region and nearby areas. Hearing this, Jang realizes that this is why they managed to keep it hidden, as the situation wasn't happening on a national scale. Jum continues explaining that jungle juice is a key element for producing the Cinderella serum, and currently, obtaining as much of it as possible is the main objective. Finally, the professor says they will have 1 week to search throughout Gangwon and find jungle juice, and any team that finds a vial will receive a perfect score. Chaos ensues in the classroom as everyone knows it's nearly impossible because jungle juice is extremely rare. On the other hand, Suchan thinks that since they're offering a perfect score to anyone who finds it, it must indeed be difficult. Jia then orders everyone to spread out and join their respective groups. Walking through the city, Jang wonders if it's okay for Seong and Dowa to separate from them. Park explains that it's more efficient if they work in 2 teams, and the real question is where they would find the jungle juice. She states that since all the jungle juice was collected from normal places years ago, it would have to be in a very specific location to find any. For some reason, our protagonist is extremely confident, claiming that getting the perfect score and becoming the best student will be easy. The boy grabs his friend's hand and starts running, mentioning that he knows a place where they might find it. They arrive at an apartment, and he explains that the can he used in middle school, although what scared him, was kept because he thought he might need it. Suddenly, the boy opens the door to the house, but is shocked by what he sees. For some reason, the entire place is a mess. He starts wondering why his home is like that, and Park asks if he was robbed. Frantically searching, the boy starts panicking because the insecticide can should have been there. Opening a drawer, he realizes it's not where he left it. Desperation takes over Jang, but Park tries to calm him down, reassuring him that they'll keep looking and will find it elsewhere. Suchan gets an idea and suggests that they check at his friend's house, as she also used the can. However, for some reason, Park lowers her head and says they don't need to go to her house. As she steps out the front door, she suggests they try searching in the city, and Jang agrees. Confused, the boy wonders what that reaction was about and if he had said something wrong. Jang and Park, with no other options, start searching the internet for clues about the jungle juice. Even in stores, nobody seems to know anything about the pesticide. In a desperate attempt, Jang tries to fake a jungle juice can but is stopped by Park. After a while, as they drink Coca-Cola, our protagonist comments that they haven't even found a single clue. He asks Park where they are supposed to find it, and Heejin explains that jungle juice has always been difficult to find, which is why the Cinderella serum is so hard to make. Feeling completely defeated, Jang laments that he will never be able to graduate as the top student and wonders who could have taken the jungle juice from his home. Confused, Park asks Soo-chan why he is so focused on getting rid of his wings. The boy remains silent but still puzzled. Heejin asks if it's because of his girlfriend, the girl he saved at the cinema. After nearly spitting out his drink, the boy denies it and starts thinking about Maihee. Recalling her gentle face, he falls silent for a moment. Finally, he declares that Maihee isn't his girlfriend and that he simply wants his university life and everything he lost back. He just wants to be normal. The boy mentions that even though Maihee distanced herself and called him a monster, he doesn't think she's a bad person, considering she almost died at the hands of a hybrid too. Park responds that he's a big, strong guy, and if she were him. However, before she can finish her sentence, Jang thanks her for saving him. He explains that if he hadn't seen Heejin that day, he would have given up on everything right then and there, and thanks to her, he found a purpose. Embarrassed, the boy starts stumbling over his words. Park is extremely pleased by those words and remains silent for a moment. She then asks her friend if Jang is grateful for having decided to come with her to the nest. The boy replies yes, but suddenly he remembers that she was the top student in the first semester. Soo-chan says that with that, she must have worked incredibly hard and probably really wants to return to being normal too. However, with a serious expression, the girl explains that she doesn't want to go back. Jang is utterly confused by this, but suddenly he receives a phone call. It's Sidong on the other line announcing that they found something special. He explains that they found an abandoned warehouse that used to belong to the company that distributed jungle juice, Natural Life. Seong concludes by saying that if they grab all the jungle juice there, not only will they get the perfect score, but they'll also be able to make hundreds of Cinderella serums. However, upon hearing this, Park stands up with a shocked expression. She tries to warn her friend, but before hanging up, Seong just says he'll send the address and ends the call. Immediately, Heejin starts running, saying they need to get there right away. Finally, the girl explains that their task was to recover already sold cans of jungle juice because the nest has tried before but has never been able to find any unsold stock. So someone suddenly finding an entire warehouse full of jungle juice seemed very suspicious and was likely a trap. We skip to the night, when after flying for some time, our protagonist finally arrives at the warehouse. Looking at the building, he mentions that it seems creepy and wonders if his friends went that way, but Park can only question how the two of them even got there. The boy says that the place gives him a bad feeling as they start entering the warehouse. Inside, the young man asks his friend if it really is a trap, while looking at some crates around him. Using the light from his phone, he comments that the place seems pretty real, but Park says they need to find the others first before worrying about that. Soo-chan suddenly bumps into a box, and while wondering who would set up such an elaborate trap, he notices several cans of jungle juice inside. Picking one up, he calls for Heejin and says that maybe it wasn't a trap after all. However, suddenly Park, who was running, is struck in her side, wounded. Jang can only watch in horror as the gentle girl falls before his eyes, with someone asking if he found what he was looking for. A man with an insect-like hand claims to have found his prey. Seeing his ally bleeding out on the ground, Jang is filled with rage. He flies at his enemy using all of his strength to defeat him. In a flashback, Jang recalls a time when, as a child, his grandmother told him he would have to say goodbye to his parents. He thought he would get used to farewells, but as he looked at a photo of an elderly man who had passed away, he realized that wasn't the case. Saying goodbye to someone close is something you can never get used to, no matter what. The creature that injured Park wears a menacing expression and says he understands why Jang is so angry, but warns that if the boy attacks like that, he'll die too. The man then uses his centipede pincers to try to wound Soo-chan. Our protagonist uses his compound eyes and dodges the attack, then immediately charges at his opponent. With a powerful punch, he hits the centipede right in the jaw. After the hit, Jang thinks the attack was effective, since he landed a clean punch to his opponent's jaw. However, the enemy says he's fine and tells Jang not to worry. Once again, Soo-chan is facing an enemy with incredibly tough skin. Realizing this, the boy recalls what the mantis said about it being called an exoskeleton, and how their bodies become extremely resilient after feeding. The centipede is impressed, noting that Jang, despite having a dragonfly complex, has never consumed anything. Confused, Jang asks what the boy means, and the centipede explains that it's what they call eating another human insect. The psychopath claims that carnivorous insects, like them, can also eat other insects. He goes on to say that his first experience eating another was incredible, like eating drug-laced meat, and just a small piece was enough to get him hooked. While he was indulging in pure euphoria, he made a fantastic discovery. The more human insects he consumes, the stronger he becomes. The centipede explains that in a society where money and politics mean everything, he was just a small, insignificant worker. But now he has escaped those constraints, seeking true power. Like an animal, he possesses the powers of his insect species, and with that, all carnivores can crush the society and its systems, rising above the weak. Finally, the man reveals that an unknown person told him to wait in that fake factory, promising free food, and he's pleased to find it was true. The centipede then uses his pincers to trap Jang, who fails to dodge the attack. Without hesitation, the carnivore slams Jang into the wall, but for some reason, Soo-chan says that's all nonsense. While prying open the pincers that held him, the boy asks why the centipede was doing all of this and questions it was just for power. In his fury, Su-chan easily frees himself from his enemy's grip. He demands to know if that pathetic motivation was the reason the centipede killed Heejin. The young man curses the centipede and without thinking twice, charges at him again. This time, he lands another solid punch to the centipede's face, visibly affecting his opponent more than before. However, the centipede barely manages to use his pincers to pierce Su-chan's leg. Right after that, the centipede uses the strength of his body to throw the young man away. The man states it's a shame because no matter how much Jang gets up or flies, he is on a completely different level from the boy. After saying this, the centipede charges once again to attack him. The assassin hits some boxes and shelves nearby but misses his target. Despite his enemy's strength, Jang charges again, thinking that no matter what level his opponent is on, he won't give up. However, once more, he is hit and thrown across the room. Even while bleeding, the boy gets up and charges again, stating that no matter how many times he falls, he'll keep fighting. As he says this, he remembers the gentle look of his friend, Park. So once more, he rushes toward his enemy and declares that nothing matters because he will kill that centipede without a doubt. With this new attack, the insect man admits that now he can at least feel a punch. Our protagonist becomes desperate, realizing once again that his attack caused no damage to his opponent. Finally, Jang recalls the training he had with his professor and tells himself there's still a way. He remembers the technique he practiced every night with Professor G, knowing it could be extremely useful. If he uses it now, it could work, so Jang flies toward the centipede once again. However, for some reason, something happens and the young man suddenly falls to the ground. Jang realizes that his wings have stopped moving and wonders why. Looking at them, he can only ask himself why this is happening all of a sudden. He recalls when his professor warned that using his powers would have side effects, and this was the price he paid for using the complex without thinking. Refusing to believe he's going to die, the boy keeps begging for his wings to move, but the centipede doesn't care and prepares to attack him. The pincers were already near Jang's neck, and he kept shouting for his wings to move. But suddenly, Park steps in, defending our protagonist from the attack. The girl stands in front of him, leaving Jang utterly shocked. Seeing his friend standing there, Jang wonders how Park managed to recover from her wounds. The centipede, enraged to see that the girl was still alive, becomes even more furious. Without hesitation, the assassin demands that Park stay dead and attacks again. Heejin, completely still, says that Jang once asked her about what her complex was. Then, with the pincers coming her way, she turns around without hesitation. The girl manages to block the attack, making the centipede's strike ineffective. The young man, having his attack deflected, groans in pain as his pincers are injured. Finally, Park tells Jang to pay attention because she's going to show him her true power. A little before Park's battle begins, we flash back to a dark street. Two girls and a boy are standing there, and one of them says someone is coming. We see that they are calling Park Heejin, a high school student, a cockroach. For some reason, the girls start mocking her, saying that when she walked down the stairs, she didn't actually go down. She went up, which meant she lived in a basement. The girls continue to make fun of the poor girl, while Heejin can only think that people's feelings toward poverty start with pity. After pity, it turns into discrimination and everyone begins mocking you for your financial situation. The boy with the teenage girls tries to take a photo of Park to ridicule her throughout the school, and that discrimination evolves into disgust. However, suddenly someone comes from behind the boy, kicking him in the head. The girls are shocked by the scene, and the boy who kicked the bully apologizes, saying that it's a habit of his to stomp on bugs. Watching that, Park thinks that despite all the disgust people felt toward her for being poor, everything was fine because she had her older brother. Heejin and Jungjin lived in a basement, so it was common for Park to come home from school and find cockroaches. One day, this happened again. The girl screamed upon seeing the insect, alerting her brother, who woke up in a panic. Frantically, he ran the pesticide in hand and asked his sister what was going on. After hearing her reply, Jungjin assured Heejin not to worry as he tried to get rid of the bug with the spray. However, the siblings realized that the spray had run out, leading to panic. Chaos ensued throughout the house, and a cockroach hunt began. After turning the entire house upside down to kill that insect, the two sat down to rest. While looking at his phone, Jungjin saw a pesticide for sale called Jungle Juice and asked if his sister wanted to try it. She agreed but mentioned that they didn't have any money. Her brother told her not to worry about the money and to just focus on studying, and in her mind, Park thought that in that basement they only had one ray of hope. That ray of hope was her brother, who always wished to send her to college. However, all that hope darkened the day Jungjin died. The girl explained that her brother died of exhaustion. He died at work, pushing his body beyond its limits just to earn a little more money. In other words, poverty had killed her brother and poverty had extinguished her light. Park wished it was just a bad dream as she cried, completely devastated. The day after Jungjin's death, the girls who bullied Park came back to do something. One of the girls opened a box full of cockroaches and said she was going to do it because Park's brother had kicked her boyfriend in the face. From a small window that led outside to the street, the girl began pouring those insects into the house. Seeing that, which disgusted her so much, Park panicked. Heejin could only scream, wishing it was just a nightmare. After doing this, the girls ran off so they wouldn't get caught. A swarm of cockroaches started running in all directions, and Park said that no matter what she did, she couldn't escape. Because poverty always found a way to creep into her life, and whenever it did, she was trapped in a deep darkness that consumed her. Seeing that swarm of cockroaches, as Park tried to flee, she stumbled upon a can of jumbo juice that her brother had bought. The insects began moving toward the girl, who grabbed the pesticide to defend herself. Heejin then sprayed jumbo juice on all the cockroaches there. We then return to the moment of the fight where Park had charged at the centipede, striking its pincers. The girl doesn't stop attacking and continues landing multiple blows on the maniac, who is thrown backward. After being thrown into some boxes, the man thought he had really killed Park with that earlier attack. The girl jumps into the air to land another hit and demands that the assassin tell her where Dohwa and Seon were. Park attempts to kick her opponent but misses, hitting only the ground. Jang, watching the fight, thinks it's incredibly powerful and realizes he can't even help. Still confused, the boy wonders how his friend is fine after taking such a huge hit earlier. Clenching his fist, the boy says he thought his friend was dead. Park walks over to Suchan, and the boy asks how she is since her hand is bleeding. The girl tells our protagonist not to worry because she heals very quickly, and suddenly her wounds begin to regenerate. Seeing this, the boy asks if that rapid healing was part of Heejin's complex, and she confirms it. Finally, Park explains that it happens because she's a cockroach. The centipede hybrid charges at Park and says that based on her movements and resilience, he knows what kind of insect she is. With the knowledge that she's a cockroach, he asks where she was transformed into an insect and guesses it was probably in a dark, damp place. The man suggests that Heejin was transformed in a basement, and upon hearing that, Park becomes furious and charges at her opponent in rage. A battle in the sky begins between the two, and the assassin realizes his theory was correct. Jang, seeing his friend's incredible abilities, thinks that's probably why Park hid what kind of insect she was. Once again, he tries to help her, but once more, Suchan falls to the ground, realizing his body isn't responding. The centipede tries to land multiple hits on Heejin, but she dodges them all. In his mind, he's extremely frustrated because not only was Park strong, but she was also so fast that he couldn't land a hit on her. The centipede thinks that even a cockroach isn't immortal, and if he could land a single solid hit, it would be enough. The maniac has a brilliant idea, realizing that Jang is likely the girl's weakness. He shifts his attack away from Park and heads towards Suchan, who is unprotected. Seeing this, the girl tries to stop it, throwing herself in front of her friend. Suchan, realizing what's happening, pleads with Heejin not to go there. But before he could do anything, Park had her chest pierced by the centipede's complex. The girl was lifted into the air, bleeding as Jang watched the whole scene unfold. The centipede man withdrew his pincers from the girl and declared that she was finally dead. Jang then saw the gaping hole in his friend's stomach. Without strength, Heejin fell in front of her friend, blood spilling everywhere. The assassin told Suchan not to be sad, as Heejin would have died anyway, even if she weren't a human-insect hybrid. After all, this society wasn't a place where the poor could survive. After saying that, the psychopath began to sense a green energy, shocked by something. He saw that our protagonist's wings were glowing intensely, and rage was radiating from the boy's entire body. Seeing this immense power emanating from Jang, the assassin could only wonder what it was. He noticed that the boy's wings were glowing and wondered if it was part of his complex, since Jang hadn't used that ability before. The man also noted that Suchan had claimed never to have consumed anyone before, but it seemed like the boy had evolved after Park's death. Then the man speculated that there were ways to evolve without consuming someone. With a maniacal expression, he stated that it was fascinating as predators get different nutrients depending on who they consume. And if he devoured Jang right now, something incredible would happen. So without hesitation, he once again used his pincers to try to attack the boy. However, in the blink of an eye, Suchan appeared in front of his enemy, ready to strike him. Before the centipede could even react, our protagonist landed a solid punch right to his face, sending him flying far away. The carnivorous insect was once again thrown against the shelves, toppling several boxes in the process. The impact covered the entire place in dust. As he collided with the wall, the centipede groaned in pain, thinking that the direct attack had been incredibly powerful. Before he could even formulate a plan, Jang appeared in front of him once again, angrier than ever. The man stated that using jungle juice turns someone into a monster stronger than any human, but that they usually retain their human intelligence and rationality. But now his opponent seemed entirely different. Consumed by rage, all Suchan could say was kill or be killed. The boy even muttered the words eat or be eaten. Without thinking about anything else, the young man kept repeating those phrases while the centipede realized that the boy no longer seemed to have a shred of humanity left. Realizing he was likely to be defeated, the man started trembling and sweating with worry. Without hesitation, our protagonist grabbed the centipede's arm, lifted him into the air, and yanked him toward himself. He immediately grabbed the man's face. He slammed him into the floor, scattering the centipede's teeth all over. Seeing an opportunity, the carnivorous insect told Jang he should watch his back and then used his pincers to try to capture him. However, in an almost animalistic way, the boy turned and bit into his opponent's complex. The narrator explained that the dragonfly's arsenal doesn't consist solely of its wings and compound eyes. Another one of its weapons is its jaws, which are equipped with sharp teeth designed to pulverize its prey. Suchan used his complex's serrated jaws and managed to rip off part of the centipede's pincers. Desperate, the assassin could only wonder where all this power in the boy had come from. In a flashback, we see Jun telling his student after a training session that if he continued to train that way, he would experience fewer side effects when using his power. The man explained that an insect's defense mechanism is how they respond to threats. Humans have both animal instincts and human reason in balance at all times, so Jang would have to break that balance and lean more on his animal instincts. Finally, Jun stated that those with a complex or potential insect power could wield immense power in situations that threaten them, and that is the defense mechanism. However, it's difficult to control this instinct because you don't just let instinct take precedence over reason. You give it full control or abandon your human rationality. And with that, Jang's complex would inevitably consume him. Realizing that rationality no longer applied to his opponent, the centipede thought this guy was different. The man stated that for years he had always been in a constant pursuit of power, hunting prey after prey. But on this day, he had chosen the wrong prey. While the psychopath thought the distance between them was too great, the only thing our protagonist did was start tearing apart his enemy's entire arm. Like an enraged animal, the boy, without any mercy, continued to torture the centipede man. Using his hands or his sharp jaws, all he did was destroy. This went on for a while, and the massacre continued, with only the screams of a helpless carnivore echoing. After leaving the enemy practically in pieces, the centipede man began to beg for forgiveness. Even so, Jang no longer cared. Consumed by rage, he lifted the man by his hair. Before he could finish off his enemy, he was struck by something. Someone appeared on the scene, and Suchan fell to the ground, unconscious. A person holding a strange liquid-like object in his hand stated that things had gone too far. He remarked that they couldn't let the prey eat the hunting dog and immediately began coating Jang's entire body with a strange substance. This individual commented that they had created a hunting arena to raise the centipede man to join the pack, but it seemed he was completely useless. However, they hadn't expected to witness another special case like Sin Gayan. The stranger crouched down, grabbing Jang by the hair, saying the boy also came from the nest. With a sinister expression, he told the unconscious boy that he wanted him. However, he mentioned that the people from the nest were very good at finding things, and outside we see several soldiers searching for Park's group. The mysterious figure noted that he didn't have time to deal with those people and said it had been fun, though brief. Jang began to wake up and saw that strange figure standing before him, saying that he hoped the boy would become even more of a monster next time. The nest people soon arrived and found the warehouse. The three soldiers were extremely uncomfortable seeing the name Natural Life because it didn't make sense for that warehouse to exist there. Suddenly, they saw someone emerging from the darkness of the warehouse and prepared themselves. However, it was Jang carrying Heejin in his arms and asking for help as his friend wasn't breathing. After some time, Suchan returned to the nest. Waiting for them was Professor Jun, accompanied by a few others. Upon seeing the shocking scene, Professor Jun was visibly disturbed. He watched his student enter the nest with Park's lifeless body in his arms. The two remained silent, staring at each other for a moment while others called for a medic. Jun broke the silence, asking what had happened to the girl. Shaken, Jang explained that they had gone to an abandoned warehouse to search for jungle juice, but there was a human-insect hybrid there. Furious, the professor broke a medical stretcher that they were about to use to carry Park. Grabbing his student's shoulder, he demanded Jang stop talking nonsense as their task was just to find cans of pesticide. Thus, a fatality made no sense, but even so, Jang remained silent. A red-haired woman who appeared to be a doctor commented that the old man was embarrassing himself in front of everyone and needed to improve his temper. Professor Yuan questioned why the professor had broken the stretcher, noting that they wouldn't be able to move Park now. He asked why the doctor was there, and the woman explained that she went wherever there were patients. Finally, the woman asked Jang to lay Heejin on the ground and began taking off her glove. The boy did as instructed, and the doctor approached the girl, placing her hand over her wound. Our protagonist, confused, asked what was happening until he saw something surprising. A blue substance began to emanate from the woman's hand, and he wondered what it was. The woman's assistant reassured Suchan, explaining that it was just treatment since Professor Yu had a very special complex. The assistant further explained that half of Yu's complex was from a firefly of the order Coleoptera, while the other half was actually a parasitic fungus found in insects, the cordyceps. More specifically, it was Ophiocordyceps sinensis, a type of cordyceps used for research, known to enhance energy and possess regenerative abilities. Finally, the woman commented that Professor Yu's complex was one of the most mysterious and useful abilities in the nest. As the woman activated her power in the blink of an eye, Park's wound was completely healed. Jang grew excited and asked if this meant his friend would survive. However, Jang's world crumbles when Professor Yu explains that it was already too late. Huan comments that Park's heart had stopped some time ago, and her complex could only heal wounds but unfortunately couldn't bring the dead back to life. Jang remains shocked and silent, and even Jun says nothing. Finally, the professor asks the other medics to take Park's body into the hospital. Jang becomes desperate and clings to his friend's body. The medics try to take Park, but the boy pushes them away, still holding tightly onto his beloved friend. In her mind, Heejin is dreaming of memories with her brother. She remembers the moment she said she hated insects so much and hated their insect-infested house, wishing they had been born rich. Jungjin responds that even insects seem cool when they are transforming, since even butterflies, dragonflies, and cicadas are incredible. He explains that even though insects are disgusting, they have moments where they can be beautiful, and the same applies to humans. In other words, no matter how hard life gets, there will always be a happy and beautiful moment. Upon hearing this, Park finds it extremely embarrassing and argues with her brother, kicking him. He stands up and tells his sister that despite everything, it's fun when they act like idiots, and that she needs to learn to hold onto the little pieces of happiness. With a ray of hope for his sister, Jungjin extends his hand and says he'll take care of any insect she wants. No matter how poor they are, they will keep fighting and living. As this dream comes to an end, Park responds by squeezing Jang's hand. Jang stands up, and everyone around notices something happening. For some reason, a change is occurring throughout the girl's body. The narrator explains that every insect goes through metamorphosis, shedding its old exoskeleton to grow. No matter how disgusting an insect might be, the moment that little life breaks free of its exoskeleton to move into the next phase of its life is its most beautiful moment. Park activates her cockroach's defense mechanism called Flower of Life, and a radiant glow begins to emit. As if resurrecting from the dead, the girl begins to open her eyes. The storm dissipates and Jang is beaming with joy, seeing his friend alive. Still confused between reality and her dream, Heejin asks the person in front of her if he caught that insect. Jang squeezes her hand and reassures her, saying yes and telling her not to worry. Finally returning to reality, the young woman starts wondering what was happening. But before she can say anything else, our protagonist embraces her. Crying, he tells her how happy he is. He's incredibly happy that his friend is okay, and with that, all the medics rush for Park. A while later, we see the Nest's medical center. Lying on a hospital bed, Jang is talking to someone. In front of him were Dowa and Seong, and annoyed. Jang asks where they had been since they spent so long searching for their friends. The blonde boy says he was sure they were in another warehouse building and not in the one where their friends were attacked. He begins to explain to Jang what had happened and how. While they were searching the warehouse, something suddenly happened. Out of nowhere, a loud noise echoed and all the shelves collapsed on top of them. Finally, Seong says they were trapped under debris for hours. Jang, though annoyed, admits that at least his friends weren't dead. Finally, Chahai asks where Heejin is, and Jang informs him that she went to the lab for a physical test. Seong sits next to Suchan, saying it sucked because all that jungle juice was fake, but Jang responds that they still had time. Confused, the boy asks how his friends found that warehouse as it was hidden in the mountains. Seong explains that they got the information from an unknown person who had a strange style. White hair with purplish tones and a weird piercing. Elsewhere, we see a dog barking at that same person who met our protagonist at the end of the battle enters a place. A person dressed as a doctor says they are always puzzled by how their boss manages with that thing and still doesn't drown. The assistant asks how it went, and the mysterious person explains that someone made a mess with the centipede man, and it was strange how the nest was so lucky with talents. Suddenly, the unknown figure pops the water bubble around their head, freeing themselves. The doctor says it seemed like there was someone the master wanted to bring there and finally calls the young man creator, to which the man confirms the theory. The white-haired man asks his friend to contact the two they planted in the nest, the ones they lent to Gaean. However, the assistant replies that Gaean had killed the aquatic insect that belonged to them. But still, the other one was well hidden among the first-year students there. The creator finds this fascinating and thinks they will try something fun. Our protagonist explains that after that, they continued searching for the jungle juice but couldn't find a single can, and the deadline for the assignment arrived. In the classroom, Jang was trembling, thinking that it was absolutely terrible since his group hadn't collected any cans. Jun, who was teaching, announces that all the groups failed to collect jungle juice. The students revolt, saying everyone knew this would happen because the power killer cans were impossible to find. In response, Professor G comments that it was expected they wouldn't find any, which leaves the students shocked. He states that he knew something like this would happen because the purpose of the assignment was to show how difficult it was to find jungle juice nowadays. Jai explains that as they experienced firsthand during the assignment, the nest was having trouble recovering these cans, and there was a reason for it. That reason was that jungle juice was also being sought by another group of human insects. The professor informs them that they don't know much about this organization. All they know is that these terrorists use jungle juice as acid in attacks and turn innocent people into human insects. They use invasive and dangerous species, with their goal being to create various types of human insects. Jia adds that of course some nest students were also transformed against their will and without reason into jungle juice users. Finally, Jay states that until now, the terrorists' interaction with the nest had been insignificant, and they had been kept in the dark for a long time, so there had been little contact. But recently, these madmen did something bold and open. They set a trap for the nest. Jun asks all of his students to listen carefully because things will now be different from the first semester. From now on, they will seriously confront these individuals when they are given real-world assignments to complete. The professor also states he will be frank and says that his students can quit the course and leave the room now, because fighting against these types of people will be a true eat or be eaten scenario, a matter of life or death, and it's extremely dangerous. Jun says that just like Group A, they might suffer serious injuries and wounds, or like in the recent Mantis escape, they could even die. Lastly, he mentions that some of them have already experienced near-death situations, so he only wants students who are ready to face death and die for the cause to remain. All the students are extremely uncomfortable and hesitant. However, Jang stands up and says he wants to ask something. Unexpectedly, he asks if fighting these dangerous people is part of their grade. The other students are confused by the question and the boy's boldness. Professor Jun promptly responds that yes, due to the dangerous factor, the credit given for the course will be reflected appropriately, helping in the path to graduation. Upon hearing this, Su-chan replies that if that's how it's going to work, then he has nothing to worry about. The boy thinks that he failed to enroll in Professor May's course and had to choose this one, believing he was out of the race to be first in the class. However, this was a high-risk, high-reward situation, so it would pay off. Seong, hearing this, comments that even after returning from the brink of death, the boy still wants to be first in the class. He also says that when he heard Lee Hanbyul and Kim Jangjin had died, he thought it was too much to handle. But if these people are going to cross the line, he will end every enemy. Doa also gets excited, saying she really wanted real fights and that's all she's ever wanted. The other students agree, knowing that they signed up for this and it can't be worse than living as an insect. Park simply sighs and agrees, while Professor Jung thinks that every semester, first-year students are always warned about the dangers. But until that day, the warning only served to caution about the chance of injury, and many usually quit just because of the possibility of getting hurt. However, he liked the first-year students that year because even when faced with fear or death, absolutely none of them dropped out of the course. After that, the man tells the class that they are dismissed. Finally, he says that starting next week, they will have a special kind of class and it won't be complicated. Jun also gives Park an instruction. He then tells his students that it will be a good opportunity for them to get to know each other. Holding some strange food in his hand, Jang looked confused, trying to understand something. He remarks that for a semester opening party at the nest, it seemed pretty normal. Jung says that actually it's weird to see people acting normally even though they are half insect. Park, looking at him, thinks about the moment where she woke up after having died and considers telling him something. However, Seong is being choked by Doa and begins asking Jang for help, which he immediately provides. Park asks Doa to stop and the girl lets go of their friend, saying she was just bored. She starts banging on the table, demanding more drinks. Seeing this, our protagonist notes that Doa is full of energy every day, but when she's drinking, it's even worse. Looking at Seong, he asks if he enjoys getting beaten up and if it's some personal preference, but Seong quickly denies it. He explains that he just didn't want to see his friend upset because that's how Doa shows affection. Seong adds that Doa didn't have many social interactions before, which is why she doesn't have a good way of communicating. Su-chan responds that he understands but notices something happening. He sees a hooded and strange person talking to Doa. This person's name is Lee Ju-hyang, and he invites the Scorpion Girl to go drink with him. Confused, Jang asks who this person is, and Park replies that he seems like someone Doa knows from the lab. Unlike how she behaves with Seong, Doa hugs her friend Lee and acts affectionately. Jung and Seong are both shocked by this behavior. Our protagonist starts teasing his friend, saying she's affectionate with some people, but the blonde quickly tells him to shut up. Su-chan then says that, in any case, it's the first time he's seen her act like that, and they wonder if there's something going on between those two. However, the gray-haired young man looks at Jang with a strange expression. Jang feels a crushing sensation from his gaze and wonders what that was all about. He starts questioning what had happened and if what he felt was real. Outside, we see Lee on top of a hill, thinking that it seems like he wasn't caught. Looking back, he sees Doa completely wrapped in webbing, and Lee thinks she's asleep because of all the alcohol and will probably stay that way. The young man approaches with an apparently malicious intent and says he just hopes she doesn't wake up. Lee, for some reason, seems about to touch Doa, saying that what's about to happen will be better for her. However, someone appears, grabbing his arm, and Jang demands to know what the guy was doing. He stares into Lee's eyes and asks him to immediately explain what he was about to do. The medical assistant then asks the creator who he wanted to bring there. The man wonders if his master really wanted that dragonfly, but the white-haired man responds that his subordinate didn't need to worry. He states that the person he wanted most wasn't the dragonfly man, although he still desired him. However, there was someone he really wanted to bring at that moment, a little toy they had been working on for some time. We then see that this toy was Doa, who was tied up. While holding his opponent's hand, our protagonist asks who the hell he was and what he was going to do with Doa. With a shy face, Jang asks if Lee was the girl's boyfriend, but the young man shrugs it off and tells him not to say such nonsense. Su-chan approaches his colleague and says that Lee was putting his hands on a defenseless person, and that was a crime. Angry, Jumian grabs Su-chan by the shoulder and throws him away. As he does so, Jang notices some black feathers floating around him. One of them hits him and for some reason pierces his body. Lee says he would be careful if he were Jang. The boy explains that those are his poisonous bristles, revealing that he was a Goliath tarantula hybrid. Junhyun states that he's going to take Doa because everyone deserves a special place and that she shouldn't be there. Finally, he says that Doa will never return to the nest. Suchen in this situation assumes that the boy in front of him wasn't a student there. Seeing that his warnings were ignored, the only thing the boy does is look at our protagonist with an expression of disdain. Without hesitation, Lee charges at Jang like a beast. Seeing his enemy coming at him, Jang thinks that last time he overdid it and couldn't do much. But now it was different, so he activates his dragonfly wings. Without a second thought, he flies into the air, escaping Lee's attack. In the air, he says that now he just needs to keep his distance, and when he sees an opening, he'll grab Doa and get out of there. Clearly irritated, Junhyun says Jang should have left while he had the chance. The boy begins using his tarantula defense mechanism and several bristles shoot from his back, and instead of just floating in the air, they are fired like bullets at Suchen. While defending himself from the attack, Jang can't understand how his opponent managed to fire those bristles like that. Suchen says there are so many of them that he couldn't dodge them all, wondering what kind of overpowered ability that was. Jang lands on the ground and starts running, thinking he needs to return and ask for reinforcements. However, in the blink of an eye, Lee appears behind Suchen, grabbing him by the collar. Annoyed, he says that as he suspected, they'll have to take the boy too. Back at the party, Park is thinking that her friend is taking too long. She mentions that she wanted to ask Jang what happened that day, but there never seemed to be enough time when it was just the two of them. Heejin becomes shy and for some reason starts stumbling over her words while thinking about Suchen. Seong approaches her and asks if Park can call Doa since they were roommates. The boy, concerned, says it's been an hour since he last saw the girl. Heejin looks extremely confused until a drunk person raises their hand, claiming to have seen Doa earlier. The person explains that somebody had taken her outside, and Park and Seong realize what was happening. Back at the fight, Jang quickly frees himself from his opponent and immediately puts some distance between them by flying backward. However, once again, the tarantula hybrid appears behind him. Our protagonist realizes the tarantula is too fast, so he needs to fly upward, and he does. Still, high up, Jang notices the spider's bristles are there, preventing him from escaping. When he lands back on the ground, Jang realizes he can't go into the air because those bristles will stop him. And while looking at the situation, he notices that his opponent is trying to trap him there. Suchen keeps trying to wake up his friend Doa. Fed up with this, Lee asks why the boy is so irritating and charges at him. Lee attacks Jang, sending him flying several meters while saying that Jang is acting like Doa's boyfriend and this situation has nothing to do with him. Annoyed, Jang responds that Doa is a member of his group and he wouldn't abandon her. He also says that he doesn't want to ruin the school life he fought so hard to achieve. As he charges towards the spider, the boy thinks this is his chance. That's why he needs to hunt his enemy, and once again his wings start glowing green. The young man recalls the moment Jai spoke about the insect's defense mechanism, which was how they reacted to threats. So Jang needed to break the balance between the two and lean more on his animal instincts. That way he could exert more power. Suddenly the boy punches Lee, sending him flying. Seeing that he landed the hit, our protagonist celebrates, but he notices his vision is becoming blurry. His body begins to weaken and he collapses to the ground. Lee, seeing this, states that it was a non-lethal dose and it would have been bad if Jang died there. Confused, our protagonist assumes he was hit the moment he struck his enemy. Junhyun says that his opponent managed to fracture his arm and his complex was indeed scary, but not as much as his own. Before completely passing out, Suchen can only think about how he didn't even see his enemy's attack. After some time, Suchen begins to wake up in an unknown location. He realizes he's naked in a bed and wonders where he is. The boy can't see anything due to the darkness and wonders if he's inside a building. Looking to his side, he notices for some reason Doa lying next to him, hugging him. Jang starts sweating, confused by the situation, and Doa also begins to wake up. The two just look at each other, not understanding what's happening. After that bizarre encounter, we see Jang covering himself with a bedsheet, with several slap marks on his face. Doa lies in bed, irritated, while our protagonist looks for a way out, but finds none. Desperate, the boy starts shouting about how they broke curfew, and this was going to go very wrong. In the meantime, he also accuses Lee of having some evil plan, but Doa responds that her friend would never do such a thing. Hearing this, Suchen gets annoyed, telling her not to start with that again, as he already said it was Lee who dragged them into this mess. Suddenly, someone starts fiddling with the door handle, so Doa and Jang brace themselves for a fight. But for some reason, when the door opens, it's a little girl announcing that lunch is ready. The two, seeing this, are completely confused. Later, we see several children eating in a cafeteria. Jang begins to wonder where they are and where Junhyun brought them. Hearing this, Doa explains that they are at the Angel Orphanage. The girl says that's where she grew up, in that small, humble orphanage. The little girl who had told them about lunch earlier is impressed, analyzing Doa's scorpion tail. Several children approach and start asking if it's real. Doa responds that the tail is just a toy and all the other kids believe her. They begin poking Doa's complex, which greatly irritates her. The young woman runs off and Jang is relieved she didn't lose her temper with the kids. Suddenly, a feminine voice asks the boy if he slept well. An older woman, the director of Angel Orphanage, states that he must be a friend of Do-wei and Lee, so he should feel at home. Su-chen thanks the woman for washing his clothes and introduces himself. The lady explains to the protagonist that Lee had brought him and Do-wei the previous night. She also mentions that Lee and Do-wei grew up together at the orphanage, and he was like a son to her, so she couldn't deny Lee's presence. Confused, Su-chen asks where the boy is now, and the director says she's not sure, as he just asked her to take care of them for a few days before leaving. In his head, Jang wonders what Junyan's plan is, since the villain knows Jang can just fly away from there. The director asks how Do is doing and wonders if she's being bullied by the other kids. Our protagonist simply replies, no. She expresses her usual concern for the girl, describing her as a gentle and fragile child. The woman explains that when Do suddenly appeared with a strange tail, she was very shocked. Meanwhile, Do is sitting on a bed when she starts having some memories of her childhood. As she's leaving the orphanage, someone appears in front of her, saying it's been a long time since they last saw her. Her father, who was wearing an electronic ankle bracelet, was angry because all he did was hit his own daughter, and yet he was still sent to prison. Drunk, the man asked the girl to tell the orphanage that her father had returned. However, completely intoxicated, he questioned whether his daughter would report him to the police again if she were abused. Frustrated, the young woman's father raised a glass bottle to strike her, demanding that she obey him. Remembering this, Do became extremely upset, stating that this place brought back bad memories. Returning to the conversation between Jang and the director, the woman stood up, saying the boy needed to return to campus, so she would go get their clothes. Suddenly, someone grabbed Su-chan's arm, and the same little black-haired girl from earlier asked the boy to draw with her. The director remarked that it seemed Yerim found Jang cute, and it would be hard to get her to let go of him now. So Su-chan replied that he could play with the young girl for a bit. While drawing with Yerim, the boy noted that he was sure Do-wei would stay longer, as that place was like her home, so she might stay a little while longer. Yerim said she had finished her drawing and showed Jang a girl with butterfly wings. Su-chan complimented her art, and the girl became excited and started sharing some facts about insects. Finally, Yerim said she wished she had wings like that because it would be so cool. However, Jang disagreed, explaining that wings might make people disgusted and maybe they wouldn't want to play with Yerim anymore since people don't like insects. The young girl retorted that she also didn't like insects like mosquitoes, as they drink people's blood and spread diseases everywhere. But while drawing, the girl mentioned that she liked dragonflies. She explained that dragonflies eat over 200 bad mosquitoes a day and are like superheroes because they're so useful. At that moment, one of the assistants there called Yerim, saying the girl needed to get ready to leave, and Jang asked if she was leaving. The girl explained that she was going to another orphanage the next day and was sad to leave her friends but excited about having a new home. She then offered her sketchbook to our protagonist, saying he could keep it. They said their goodbyes, and the girl asked Jang to get home safely. As he opened the sketchbook, the young man thought it was therapeutic, but he felt it was time to take Do-wei back to campus. In a place resembling a basement, we see the director asking her assistant if the preparations for Yerim's departure were underway, and the woman confirmed. The lady mentioned that Yerim was waiting patiently in her room, and at that moment, the doctor entered the room. In a dark room, we see the young girl strapped to a gurney, and at that moment, the director congratulated Yerim on her happy departure. The woman asked her assistant if anyone had seen her bring Yerim down there, and the assistant replied, no. She then added that this wasn't the first time they had done something like this. The director asked what they were sending this time, and the assistant explained that the box said it was a giant millipede. After donning the appropriate equipment, the woman approached her workbench and picked up a can of jumbo juice. She prepared to apply it to the insect, stating that she didn't want to harm or diminish the quality of her product, referring to Yerim. Suddenly, a sound echoed throughout the room. The door began to open, and Jang peeked through a crack, politely asking for permission to enter. However, the orphanage director quickly closed the door, asking why the boy was still there. Jang replied that he was looking for the bathroom and had gotten lost. The director remarked that it was strange since this was the second basement and visitors weren't allowed in there. With a menacing expression, Jang replied, I know. Then with fury, he kicked the door into the old woman's face, sending her flying backward. The injured woman asked what the boy thought he was doing. Jang responded that as he was leaving, he saw what Yerim had drawn. With the sketchbook in hand, we see that the drawing showed the orphanage director receiving several cans of jumbo juice. The young man also noted that the woman had lied and did know that Do-wei had been turned into a scorpion. With authority, the boy stated, just so you know, I always respected my elders, but only the human ones, not worms like you. 10 minutes before that incident, we see Jang staring at the drawing, wondering what it meant. He realizes that Yerim and the girl had left through a door, and while walking through the orphanage, Jang notices a door with the inscription restricted area. The young man tries to enter, but one of the orphans says that those stairs lead to the basement, and the teachers yell at anyone who tries to go down there. Confused, our protagonist wonders why there was such a basement in an orphanage. Su-chen realizes that there was probably something underneath, which is why he goes down. The boy who tried to warn Su-chen attempts to stop him, but it was already too late. Lee had also arrived at the scene, only staring at the basement door as it closes. Back in the present, inside the basement, the director remarks that it's impressive that the boy managed to find that place with just a drawing, especially because they protect that area by cutting it off from the ground floor, and Jang had probably defeated all the guards protecting it. The woman says she didn't understand why Junyan chose to bring the stranger there, and that if Jang had just gone home quietly, he wouldn't have gotten hurt. Then one of the people assisting the doctor moves to attack our protagonist. However, without mercy, Su-chan strikes the woman, throwing her away. The old woman, confused, questions how that boy could be so powerful. Looking at the pictures of all the children who had been transformed, Jang asks the doctor how many children were tortured. Angry, the boy demands to know if those people have any idea of the kind of suffering they are putting those children through, as all of them will endure looks of disgust. Without hesitation, he once again charges at the hospital director to strike her. However, something emerges from the woman's mouth, heading toward Jang's shoulder and piercing it. With that, our protagonist becomes extremely confused, wondering what that was. Afterward, the director wipes Jang's blood from her mouth, and the boy becomes confused, wondering if that was her complex. He begins to use his wings to move, but something was approaching his back. Several hybrids arrive at the scene, ready to finish off Jang, and the director asks if he was really ready to deal with all of them. The boy starts dodging the attacks, and at one moment, Su-chan realizes that all those people are human insects. Dodging a few more attacks, Jang struggles to move as the room was small. He thinks that there wasn't enough space to fly and that he needed to come up with something. However, before he could think about it, he notices that one of the orphanage assistants was carrying Yerim out of the room. Jang tries to stop her, but at that moment, once again, the orphanage director attempts to attack him, saying that they would have to finish the job elsewhere. The woman mentions that it seemed Junyan was thinking about convincing Jang to join the cause, but she believes the boy would be more useful dead. In the room, Doa was sitting on her bed staring at a teddy bear. Lee arrives carrying a bag, saying that he managed to get some clothes and other things for his friend. The boy explains that he brought those because the orphanage only had clothes for children and Dowa would probably need something better. Changing the mood, the girl says that she just felt a huge tremor coming from the basement. She asks what that place was and wonders if that was really the orphanage she remembered. Without lying, the boy explains that in the orphanage's basement, there is a laboratory that transforms children into human insects. Upon hearing this, Doa becomes completely furious and approaches her friend, grabbing him by the collar and questioning what he was talking about. Lee retorts, asking if the girl remembered what her life used to be like before becoming a human insect. We then flash back to the moment when the girl's father tried to attack her after getting out of jail. Lee was arriving at that scene, saying to Doa that the girl he once knew was very fragile and extremely weak, unable even to protect herself. Junyan says that Doa in the past couldn't even stand up to something as terrible as her own father, and all she did was beg for mercy while being beaten. The truth is that she didn't even have the strength to defend herself from the attacks. The young man says that he wanted very much to help his friend and even thought about killing her father. But even if he helped her in that situation, it wouldn't solve the problem because she needed something different. The girl needed to change, adapt, and most importantly, improve. Doa, upon hearing that statement, realizes that's how she became that monster. Lee says that he knows it's a lot to process, but he mentions that in the end, the girl turned out fine. Because in the past, Jungle already made her strong, not just on the outside, but on the inside as well. So on a day when her father once again went to beat her, the girl defended herself. With that, the man became even more furious and prepared to give the girl another beating. However, by becoming a human insect, she finally ended that pain and became free, beating up her own father. Jumian says that those children are no different, as all of them are poor orphans abandoned by their parents. That means when they grow up, they won't be able to survive in the real world. Because the paths of those children were chosen the moment they were born, they need a fresh start. With jungle juice in his hand, the boy states that the spray is the only thing that will help those children start over. He asks Doa to imagine a natural world where circumstances don't decide your fate, and in that world, you don't need to hide your tail or wings. The boy says he serves a person who can make that world a reality, and he could change the whole world for human insects. Taking Doa's hand, the boy asks her to forget about Cinderella and the nest, and that even if she returned to normal, she would still answer to all the powerful people. That's why Lee asks the girl to join them, as that group will create a new world where no hybrid needs to be imprisoned. Appealing to empathy, the boy asks if Doa will stay with him as they are friends. Doa responds that it's clear they are friends. However, suddenly, she strikes the half-spider boy, throwing him far away. The boy is hurled against the door of the room, ripping it off. The scorpion girl says that since Lee is her friend, she won't sit back and watch him ruin his life. Finally, Doa says she won't let Junian do that, even if it means she has to beat him up, because she would only do it enough to knock some sense into her friend's head. Down in the basement, our protagonist was in a heated battle, with all his blood being drained. Upon closer inspection, the young man sees that all those people were mosquitoes. Seeing she was at an advantage, the orphanage director says that in 3 or 4 more bites, the boy would be defeated. She claims she's sure Jang would like to find the child from earlier, but you should give up now, as Yerim is a valuable product that belongs to the creator. With her strange tongue, the woman says Yerim has already been taken to another facility, and there's nothing Suchan can do. Our protagonist begins to recall what Yerim had told him about dragonflies eating more than 200 mosquitoes a day. The boy comments that the little girl had said she really liked dragonflies because they're like superheroes. Jang says he knows she's just a child imagining silly things, but now that he's heard what she thinks, he wants to do something. The doctors there realize something they didn't want to. All prey face a moment when the same instinctual fear settles into their beings. A moment when the prey encounters an invincible natural predator. At that moment, Suchen begins to use his power, saying that he has no other option but to become Yerim's hero. Seeing all the power of that dragonfly, all the doctors are terrified. Jang thinks that he first needs to rescue the child. However, before he can leave, he is attacked from multiple directions by the mosquitoes, and the director says he won't get out easily. Once again, they all spit that substance from their mouths to try to drain Jang's blood, but he manages to dodge. The young man knows all those mosquitoes are fast, and he says it doesn't matter because he is even faster. Then, after dodging all the attacks, the boy manages to strike the mosquitoes. After hitting most of the mosquitoes, the young man goes and lands a direct punch on the last remaining one. The last of the medical assistants, after being struck, immediately falls to the ground, already unconscious. Even so, our protagonist wasn't doing well, as it was difficult to maintain that speed because it bothered his eyes. The director, seeing that her accomplices were defeated, once again tries to attack Jang, who manages to dodge. The boy thinks that he can't waste any more time and there must be something he can do. The orphanage window is shattered, and outside, Dowa and Lee are fighting. Looking at her friend, the girl says she will never accept that stupid plan. The boy responds that he knew she wouldn't accept it, but he just didn't think he'd have to make her give up by force. Lee once again begins to use the tarantula's final defense mechanism and shoots several bristles at Dowa. However, because she has an extremely resistant shell, the girl doesn't suffer any damage and calls the boy an idiot. She charges forward and strikes Lee while stating that his little tricks won't work. The boy comments that he thinks his stingers don't have much impact on that exoskeleton. Junian charges at Dowa and says he will use only brute force to take the girl down. However, using her tail, the scorpion girl jumps into the air and dodges. The girl asks her friend to give up and says that this was the time to end it and return to reality. Then Dowa lands 2 kicks right on Lee's face. After landing on the ground, the girl mentions that it was pretty cool, but she went easy on Lee since they are friends. Suddenly, a speeding bus passes by the girl. Dowa realizes that the director's medical assistant was taking Yerim away. Thus, the scorpion girl begins to chase that vehicle to stop it. The one who was kidnapping the girl manages to get a few kilometers away. She thinks it seems like she lost Dowa, as not even that girl could keep up with a car, and now she will just take Yerim to a quiet place. Suddenly, Dowa comes out of the woods and appears in front of the car. The girl stands in front of the vehicle and the assistant realizes that she had cut through the forest. Without hesitation, the girl uses her scorpion stinger to anchor herself to the ground and with her own hands lifts the massive bus. The girl says that this time the assistant really made her use her true powers. Without hesitation, Dowa slams the vehicle onto the ground, causing the assistant to hit her head. After that, the girl says it's better for her to thank the child, because she would have crushed that car if not for Yerim. Suddenly, Lee also arrives at the scene, commenting that he couldn't believe his friend managed to chase down a car. The girl manages to defend herself from her opponent's attack and immediately tries to counter. Lee barely blocks the girl's kick, but Dowa, excited by the fight, tells the boy to give up. As she continues to deliver several attacks with her scorpion tail, the girl mentions that this complex wouldn't do any harm to her, and then she strikes Lee with a powerful blow. The boy replies that she was right and that he could see that his stingers wouldn't work on Dowa, but for sure they would work on the children at the orphanage, as they are so weak that a single sting would send them to the hospital. Lee says that he's going to help Dowa understand the harsh reality and that having those powers is better than having nothing. The boy begins to peel off some bandages that were on his face, and after doing so, he reveals some fangs on his cheeks. Finally, the boy says that this is exactly what those children need to survive. Dowa is in shock, realizing that besides being a tarantula hybrid, her friend is also half black mamba, and the boy, without hesitation, charges at her. With his snake fangs, he pierces his friend's neck and says that now she couldn't escape, as not even Dowa could avoid that. Because the moment the prey sees those fangs, the battle is already over. The scorpion girl tries to fight back, but she begins to get affected by the venom, and the boy replies that he didn't give her enough venom to kill her. Seeing the girl collapse unconscious, he tells his friend to relax and take a nice nap. The boy climbs on top of the bus and rips off the door, but he realizes that Yerim was already waking up due to the analgesic wearing off. He says that everything was fine and reaches his hand toward the girl, saying that now it's all over. But who arrives at an unbelievable speed is our protagonist, kicking his enemy in the back. Even after that attack and being thrown several meters away, Lee manages to stay on his feet. Junian becomes irritated that once again the transfer student was getting in his way. The boy says that he didn't expect the dragonfly to defeat all the insects, but he thinks that a natural enemy can't be overcome, not even by numbers. As he wraps his hand with his bristles, the boy warns that they both know how this fight will end, as Jang couldn't even touch him because of the stingers. Su-chan agrees but says that's what happened before. Iram, who was waking up and looking at Jang, wonders who that person was. In a flashback, we return to the moment when Su-chan was dodging some of the director's attacks. With his compound eyes, he scans the entire area and notices that there was a pair of protected goggles. We finally return to the present moment, and with those goggles, the boy states that things are different now, and he's going to defeat the tarantula. Lee explains to Jang that he brought the boy there so he could join his cause, and that it would be better than leaving a witness behind, but now he's just going to kill him. Then Su-chan realizes that his enemy is making an attack. Once again, Junyan uses his bristle slingshot, firing several black quittles in Jang's direction. Because the boy is wearing the goggles, he's able to use his maximum speed and easily dodges some of the bristles. However, others graze him and he realizes that they burn a lot. Irritated, Junyan says that the newcomer will never defeat him since he has no tolerance for venom. In other words, Jang will never be able to get past all the bristles, and he'll never even be able to touch him. And that was impossible, but looking up, the boy notices that Su-chan had disappeared. Immediately after, our protagonist strikes his enemy with a strong punch to the jaw. The boy is thrown several meters forward without being able to react or even see the attack. Lee, in the air with his mouth bleeding, wonders how that happened. Su-chan responds that the boy could spread those bristles around all he wanted, but there would always be a moment when a path would open. And if he could hit that one moment, he could defeat that spider. The boy regains consciousness and manages to stabilize himself on the ground. As he flies toward his enemy, Su-chan thinks that the goggles are protecting his eyes from the wind and dust, and now he doesn't have to worry about anything. Because of that, it's now a completely different game, and so the boy begins to use all his speed to escape all the bristles. Once again, he appears in front of Lee and strikes the boy, this time with a knee. Even with that powerful blow to his face, Junyan quickly recovers. The boy uses his Black Mamba defense mechanism and tries to pierce Jang's neck. However, Su-chan manages to step on his enemy's chest and quickly gains distance. He thinks it was a close call and that the bastard approached in an instant. With that, Jang assumes that those fangs are probably what Lee used to bring him down in their last battle. Junyan tells Su-chan not to get in his way because he had to complete his mission. Irritated, the boy says that Jang has no idea what he's getting into and doesn't know how miserable someone's life can be. In a flashback of Lee's life, we see the boy as a child, watching his mother kneeling before 3 people. The boy explains that his mother was usually sick, and she had him when she was very young, so it was hard to pay the bills. Because of that, she was often beaten by several loan sharks. One day, the boy tried to defend his mother and attacked the person beating her. However, one of the man's thugs grabs the boy and takes him away, while Lee states that the weak are always exploited. He thinks that if only he had been stronger, he would have saved his mother, who suffered so much at the hands of those loan sharks. The boy thinks that if he had his powers a little sooner, they could have been happy and his mother would be alive. After that speech, the boy states that this is the truth. Life is a tragedy without any power. The boy begins to activate hundreds of bristles, while saying that for Dowa and for all those children, he will save them and make all those people happy. Unlike the slingshot, the boy now uses a defense mechanism called Hydra, shooting hundreds of bristles in Jang's direction. Our protagonist, seeing this, becomes desperate, wondering how there could be so many bristles coming at him. Looking back and seeing Dowa, he confirms to himself that he needed to hide, but there was no way to avoid it. Su-chan throws himself in to protect Dowa for some reason from the bristles. Lee calls him an idiot, as the scorpion girl had developed a tolerance to his bristles, and he would never attack her without considering that first. The boy also says that this impulsive hero mentality is what's going to end up killing Jang, and that this will end soon. Su-chan tells the boy to stop talking nonsense and once again uses his wings. The boy questions if Lee really thinks he can make those children happy, and after getting up, he reveals that he was actually protecting Yerim, who was with Dowa. Finally, our protagonist says that it was Junyan who was putting the children in danger. Lee, seeing what he had done, questions what that child was doing. Shortly before that attack, we see that the girl woke up inside the bus and saw Dowa unconscious. She crawled and hugged Dowa in an attempt to protect her from the bristles. Finally, Su-chan charges at Junyan and states that the girl was not weak, and she didn't need a stupid complex because Yerim was already strong enough. Once again irritated, the boy tries to use the Black Mamba's defense mechanism to strike our protagonist's neck. As he advances toward his enemy, Lee thinks that the boy could talk all he wanted, and nothing would change because he was faster than Jang could ever be. And Su-chan will never defeat him and never even had a chance to win that battle. Even that surprise attack has no effect, and using his compound vision, Su-chan manages to escape the strike. Lee is impressed that the boy was able to use that speed and dodge his attack. However, he realizes that Su-chan wasn't reading his movements. He was simply fast enough that Lee couldn't even keep up with him. The narrator explains that the fastest dragonfly can reach a speed of 80 kilometers per hour, They can maintain this phenomenal speed while freely changing direction, which allows the dragonfly to completely block its prey's escape route. Jang then uses his dragonfly defense mechanism called Hare Hunt and strikes his enemy several times. Lee can only see that extreme speed and can't keep up with Jang's movements. As he advances behind Lee, Su-chan states that the only weak one there was him, and then lands a full punch to the boy's face. After delivering that blow to his enemy, our protagonist flies a few meters ahead due to the high speed. The boy quickly lands and looks back to see if it had been effective. He then notices that Lee was lying on the ground and giving him the victory. Yerim, who was beside Dowa, is impressed with Jang. Our protagonist asks several questions to the girl, but the girl is only able to remain in shock. She says that there was something on Su-chan's back and the boy realizes it. Su-chan sees that he forgot his wings were out and already knew what that meant. The boy has a flashback to the moment when the person he loved most called him a monster, and that frightens him. Promptly, Jang turns around, apologizing for scaring Yerim, while thinking he would give the girl some space. However, the girl grabs Jang's coat, asking him to wait. In fact, she was saying that his back was injured from the spider's attacks. Yerim starts to tear up, sad for Jang, and seeing this, Jang says that he's fine and knows someone at his school who can heal that. The girl, the smile on her face, thanks Su-chan for saving her. The boy, receiving that compliment, feels extremely happy and just gives a goofy smile. The little girl thinks that Jang wasn't saying anything because he was in too much pain from his back, but the boy responds that everything is fine. He places his hand on her head, asking her not to worry, as he will return to the nest, explain what happened, and they will be able to help her. However, the boy thinks that before that, he should wake Dowa up, but when he looks ahead, he realizes that the girl was no longer there. Jang starts to wonder if the girl had left or what had happened. He thinks that she was lying there just a few seconds ago, so there was no way she could have just disappeared. From behind our protagonist, a mysterious person appears as if camouflaged and invisible. Jang quickly notices and turns around, thinking that person was Lee's accomplice. However, as he attacks, the boy realizes that he didn't hit anything and is extremely confused by this. Su-chan realizes that the enemy had disappeared and wonders what kind of complex could pull off such a feat. The mysterious voice tells Lee that he had lost, and the boy, recovering from Jang's blow, recognizes that voice. He thinks that person was the creator's transporter, and then the stranger appears on top of a tree, stating that Lee's condition was hilarious. The person informs that the creator knew Lee would fail to convince Dowa, which is why he sent her there to retrieve the girl. So later, he could tame Dowa with feeding training, and upon hearing this, Lee becomes furious. The boy tries to argue that he hadn't failed yet, and that he could still convince the girl to join them. Chunyan simply asks the transporter to put his friend down. Furious, the boy uses his bristle attack and fires several black quills in the direction of that person. The transporter states that Lee's useless affection continues to cloud his judgment, and the creator has always disapproved of that weak nature. That's why the creator had no reason to keep such a useless dog. Suddenly, the person who was there disappears in the blink of an eye. Lee laments that he lost sight of the person and needs to go after him immediately. However, when he tries to stand, the boy collapses and thinks that he has no strength left. As a last resort, bleeding and desperate, he calls out to the newcomer. The boy tells Jang that he knows he also wants to save Dowa, and for that reason, he'll show him the way to the girl, but under the condition that he goes with him. Su-chan asks if the boy really knows where that person went, but Lee responds that he doesn't. However, Junyan knows a way to track them. Elsewhere, Dowa is tied up with spider webs and sitting in a chair. Facing the white-haired man, the girl asks who that person is, and the boy responds that he was simply her benefactor for some time. He explains that he didn't want to hurt her and only wanted Dowa to join their cause and be part of the team. The scorpion girl gets furious for being dragged there just for this and immediately refuses. The creator mentions that he loves the girl's courage and comments that those raised in the jungle are always more spirited than the specimens raised at home. A plate of food is served at the table, and the white-haired boy says that Dowa must be starving after such a long day. Irritated, the girl replies that she isn't hungry, and upon hearing this, the creator asks her not to worry, as they are not trying to drug her with the food. He just firmly believes that all living beings are driven by appetite because every being lives to eat and eats to live. The creator also mentions that he is quite fond of dogs in this regard, as they are loyal, all in the simple hope of receiving a delicious meal in return. Seeing no reaction from Dowa, he asks if she won't try it because she isn't hungry yet or because she's already figured out the trick. And if that's the case, it's a shame, as they went through a lot of trouble to make that food appetizing for Dowa. Realizing that the food was made from the meat of another hybrid, the girl panics and says that the creator is sick. She says that no one will ever convince her to eat that garbage. The creator, however, responds that whether she wants to eat or not doesn't matter because that decision is not hers. Suddenly, the girl is stunned by someone and begins to feel something strange in her body. Gu arrives and hugs the young girl as Gaeon, saying that it's been a long time since she's seen the creator. The white-haired boy says he's happy that his colleague came to offer help, and the woman responds that he better have a good reason for calling her. Seeing the food on the table, Sin asks if she was called there just for that and wonders if they're playing around with the food industry. However, the mysterious being responds that this was feeding time, and what he wanted to show was how to brainwash a carnivorous insect with feeding. The boy explains that he calls it feeding training. First, he gets the insects addicted to the taste of meat and then uses that to break the spirits of stubborn specimens. The man also says that although Gaeun's venom is quite effective, it's temporary, but the effects of feeding training are permanent. Finally, he comments that with that method, Gaeun could take down the bastards of the nest that she hates so much, and the young woman admits that she's actually a bit tempted. She then moves close to Dowa's ear and asks the girl to eat the food. Dowa begins to approach the food, and the creator states that their minds are still conscious throughout the feeding process, but it doesn't matter, because once they taste it, all those insects from the nest and friends will look even more like delicious pieces of meat. However, suddenly something falls from the sky, breaking through the glass ceiling and hitting the table where the food was. Gaeun and the transporter don't understand what's happening and just raise their hands to defend themselves from the shards. The creator remains still, but is nonetheless quite surprised by it. In a flashback, we see Jang asking Lee if there was a way to track those people, and the boy replies that the transporter doesn't fly, so they are moving on foot. The boy explains that since tarantulas are spiders, he had set up a safety web around the forest surrounding the orphanage for some time. Junyeon reveals several layers of webbing spread throughout the area and says that the transporter could hide all he wanted, but he couldn't cover all his tracks. Back in the present moment, the head of that association seems quite pleased with the situation. The creator sees Jang and Lee united in trying to save Dowa and remarks that it's an interesting combination. The white-haired man, seeing this, is genuinely impressed to have unexpected visitors and says he never thought that Dragonflay would come all the way there. He also comments that it seems the boy has made a new friend. Our protagonist is extremely confused as he doesn't immediately recognize who that person is. Then he recalls the moment when Seon gave the description of the unknown person who provided the information about the warehouse. So seeing that all the indicators match that man, the boy assumes he was probably the one who set up that ambush. The boy also notices that behind him is Gaeun Sin. Lee states that it seems Dowa had been stung in the neck and that they should be careful. The boy informs them that the neurotoxins of the emerald wasp can alter the nervous system of its prey, and they are controlling her with Gaeun's abilities. And finally, he concludes that they are doing this to force Dowa to feed and turn her into their slave. Hearing that word, Jang thinks that feeding must refer to the act of eating another human insect and assumes the creator is probably forcing Dowa to do that. The creator shamelessly responds that he was only trying to tame the scorpion girl with food, but immediately, Lee throws several bristles in his direction. Lee demands that the man stop saying such nonsense as he had given his word that the people at the orphanage wouldn't be harmed, yet he was still trying to do this. Finally, the boy says the man better have a good explanation for it, or he'll make another enemy. The creator mocks Junyeon, then grabs a tablet, informing him that he's going to show Lee something from the lab. He turns the screen toward the boy, commenting that he surely was dying to see this. On the tablet screen, you can see several children who once belonged to the orphanage, now part insect and eating human flesh. Upon seeing this scene, the boy loses his mind and becomes completely enraged. The creator, on the other hand, states that the training has proven quite effective, as children are less likely to resist feeding, and they would make useful hunting dogs. Finally, he tells Lee that those children are having fun and living new lives just as he wanted. No longer able to endure the provocation, the boy immediately charges at his enemy. Junyeon tries to use his Black Mamba defense mechanism to pierce the creator. Still in the air, the boy says he's been betrayed and calls the creator a bastard. At that moment, Sin thinks that those damn kids were getting too rebellious and that she needed to teach them a lesson. For some reason, Dowa, who was in our protagonist's arms, breaks free, and we see one of Lee's fangs flying from the sky. It turns out that the one who ripped it out was Dowa with her scorpion tail. The boy is extremely confused, seeing that his friend is still being controlled by Gaeun. The woman explains that, as Lee had said earlier, her complex allows her to completely alter an insect's nervous system, and he would be surprised by the numerous options available with that, such as controlled paralysis and even forced doping. The narrator explains that you could say the scorpion's primary weapon is its tail, but in reality, it's just an auxiliary tool for some species. In the case of the Emperor Scorpion, its greatest weapon is its sheer physical strength and size, mainly due to its rock-hard exoskeleton. The enormous pincers are noteworthy as they are powerful enough to crush even the iron shell of a beetle. In other words, these pincers are nothing less than armor made for the toughest battles. And with this, Dowa uses her ability to coat her hands with scorpion pincers. Seeing this, Lee realizes what's happening, but before he can react, he's struck in the arms by Dowa. With just that blow, the boy groans in pain and wonders how the girl could be so strong. Gaeun, watching this, states that all she did was trigger a bit of Dowa's complex, and even so, the effect is extraordinary. The young woman says her venom will remain effective for another 2 hours, so Lee should do his best. At that moment, without hesitation, Dowa relentlessly continues trying to attack her own friend. Jang tries to stop the girl, but a spider web starts to wrap around his arm. The one doing this is the creator, who grabs the boy and begins to toss him into the air. Suchan tries to break free but realizes his entire body is wrapped in a spider web. The mysterious man explains that he just cast it, and it suits Jang perfectly since he's a dragonfly. Finally, he says that he's going to trap the boy for now and begins trying to cover his whole body with the web. However, the young man manages to free himself by biting and tearing through the web with his mandibles. Jang starts flying toward his enemy, asking why he's doing such cruel things. He questions why the man is turning those children into human insects and forcing them to feed. Before the creator can even see the attack, he's hit square in the face by a blow from Jang. The man is quite impressed, as he was struck and couldn't even see his enemy, and somehow the dragonfly was faster. Again, Jang asks if he thought he could escape after causing so much pain. Then the beating session begins, and our protagonist lands multiple blows to his enemy's face. A barrage of punches, like a living machine gun, is unleashed on the spider, who can't defend himself. Completely beaten, he wipes his face while saying that it seems quite violent, but he wouldn't want it any other way. The man grabs his earring, activating something, and water begins to fall from the ceiling, and the creator states that the wilder a mud is, the better is to tame. Seeing that the sprinklers have turned on and his wings are getting wet, Jang starts to panic. Meanwhile, the white-haired man comments that it was an incredible flight and that Jang has grown a lot in a short time, which is why he had to have Suchan by his side. The man begins producing more spider webs and wraps them around the young man's neck, trapping him instantly. He explains that there's only one species of spider in the world known to live underwater. It's called the water spider, so by activating the water spider's defense mechanism, the man creates a bubble of water around Jang's face. The boy, trying to break free, realizes that he's suffocating for some reason. As he approaches him, the creator explains that his web allows him to manipulate water and says that this complex has numerous practical uses. The creator says that Jang could also have this power because after he wakes up from a nap, he'll receive a proper feeding training session. Elsewhere, Yerim is holding Jang's jacket while wondering how the young man is doing. She remembers that Jang gave her that jacket to make her feel safer and asked her to stay there as he went after Dowa. Looking ahead, the girl can only hope that her big brother protects Dowa. Park arrives at that location, extremely confused by the situation, and sees that Yerim is holding her friend's jacket. Lee is also not doing well, and all he can do at that moment is try to defend himself from his colleagues' attacks. Watching the entire fight, Sin says that this is what she loves to hear, and the sound of bones breaking pleases her greatly. One of Lee's blocks succeeds, but he's thrown far away. Dragged across the asphalt, the boy tears all his clothes and he thinks it feels like he's being hit by a damn cannon and won't last much longer. Since she's being controlled, Do doesn't give him time to think and once again charges at him, striking his arms. The boy starts to feel the bones in his forearms breaking and realizes that at this rate, she's really going to kill him. Once again, he uses his bristles, which are easily blocked by the scorpion girl. The young woman charges once more, jumping and striking in Lee's direction. However, she realizes she missed, and Lee takes advantage of this to appear behind the girl. Lee prepares to use the last remaining black mamba fang to wound Dowa. However, the girl turns around looking at the boy with an extremely cute expression. Seeing this, Lee freezes and can't bring himself to attack the girl he likes so much. Dowa takes this opportunity and once again uses her scorpion tail to strike the boy. After immobilizing Jang, the creator realizes that Sin isn't playing around and that Dowa truly is an emperor scorpion. The man also says that even though the doping effects seem effective, Dowa was also very well trained by the nest, and she's really amazing. After saying this, he asks Junion if he agrees, and we see that the boy is completely beaten up. The creator asks the boy to give up as there's no reason for him to endure all that pain just to save his friend. He claims that Dowa will clearly lose a bit of her humanity after she starts feeding, but in the end, that doesn't matter, since they were all changing this miserable world. Upon hearing this, Lee recalls the moment he told Dowa to imagine a natural world where circumstances don't decide your fate. This entire vision is shattered as the creator explains that he wanted a new world where only capable specimens would remain and the weak humans would be eliminated. Finally, the creator says that in this future without humans, there's no value in preserving their humanity. And as a form of torture, he once again asks if Lee agrees with this idea. Sin, hearing this, states that it doesn't seem like Junion has the strength to move anymore, so she orders Dowa to go and eat the food from the centipede's carcass. Watching his friend and unable to do anything, the boy thinks that he only ever wanted her to be happy. The young girl then grabs the food with her scorpion claw and prepares to finally eat it, as the creator assures that there's no need to worry, because it will make her happy. Jang, who is suffocating, declares that everything is a big lie. The boy says that this nonsense will only turn Dowa into another monster, and that won't make her happy. Because once you become a monster, there's no one left by your side that you can rely on. And with that, there's no meaning in living like that. Finally, Suchan says there's no point in a life where you're cast aside alone. We then flash back to Lee's past, where some of his orphanage peers were talking about how his mother had died. They decided to stay away from the boy as they were afraid of catching a disease from him. Young Dowa approached the boy and asked if she could walk with him. However, the boy asked the girl to leave because he feared his bristles might hurt her. Nonetheless, Dowa replied that if he was embarrassed about his bandages, he didn't need to be, since she wore them all the time too because she always got hurt. The boy was extremely moved by this, not even knowing how to respond. Lee in the present reflects that now, looking back, if Dowa hadn't been there, he would have always been alone. The boy then grabs his last remaining bristle, and Gaean, seeing this, asks if the boy still plans to fight, even though he's completely defeated. Junyan tells himself that he doesn't have the strength to stand, but if he can land maybe just one bristle. All the boy wanted was to stop the young girl somehow. So without thinking much, he throws his last ray of hope at Dowa. The bristle flies between Dowa's mouth and the meat. Seeing this, Sin mocks the boy, saying he tried to knock down the piece of meat but missed. But it's revealed that the boy's real goal was to free our protagonist, so the air bubble is hit by the bristle and explodes. Upon seeing that Jang is free, the creator panics, immediately turning around and seeing. Before the man can even react, the dragonfly flies toward Dowa. The boy manages to fly past the girl and snatch the piece of meat from her hands to stop her. As Junyan, after using his last bit of strength, realizes he can't move anymore, he asks Jang to save the scorpion girl. Our protagonist, without hesitation, throws the piece of meat miles away, preventing Dowa from having the chance to eat again. In the air, he thinks that those people below can't reach him up there, and the sprinklers won't be able to wet his wings either. The creator, seeing this, states that there's much more meat where that came from, and if Jang thinks he's safe and above it all, he's completely wrong. The man begins manipulating his webs, which head towards Suchan. We then see, just before that moment, when Lee told Jang that he hadn't mastered his abilities yet. Lee explained to Jang that the mechanism he used before was definitely fast, but wasn't powerful enough. He informs him that it won't get Suchan anywhere against the man they call the creator, as he's on another level. The boy says he's not on the same side as Jang, but he needed the boy's help to get Dowa out of there. Said he was going to give the young man a small piece of advice. Suchan clings to the ceiling, and the creator notices this but is extremely confused about what the boy is trying to do. Jang thinks that the advice was only theoretically easy, but in practice, it's a whole different story. We then see that the advice was that the next time Jang reached maximum speed, he should hit his opponent with his whole body, not just his fist. Suchan, remembering this, imagines himself as a bullet and prepares to execute the move. In one swift motion, the boy uses the strength of his legs and the ceiling to propel himself toward the spider. Jang's crouching start increases initial speed, and his defense mechanism strengthened his wings. At full acceleration, Jang's speed filled the space. At that moment, the creator felt what it was like to be in the sights of a hunting rifle. Jang then successfully strikes with his entire body like a bullet from a rifle, hitting the creator and slamming the man into the ground. Our protagonist remarks that using his body like a bullet and charging at full speed is simple enough but too fast for his body to handle. He can only fly in a straight line at that speed, as stopping or turning is nearly impossible, meaning it's a one-time chance to do it. Resolute in his thoughts, the young man states that no matter what, he had to take down the creator. The creator, after being hit squarely, thinks that it was very risky. In his mind, the man says that if he hadn't cast that web right before impact, he would have been seriously injured. He also notes that he would expect that kind of move from a nest teacher, but not from a useless freshman. Laughing, the man admits that it was definitely quite thrilling. As his last card, the man uses the final defense mechanism of the water spider. He creates a giant water bubble around himself and Jang called the aquarium. The boy looks around in confusion, wondering how he ended up underwater. Suchan tries to escape, but the creator responds that there's no way out and that this is his aquatic fortress. He moves forward, grabbing our protagonist by the neck, saying that Jang is now his prisoner. As he's being drowned, Jang thinks that his enemy's defense mechanism drained his strength and that there's nothing more he can do. The creator says that Suchan would have been fine if he were an aquatic insect, but it's a shame because Jang has lost. The man also mentions that he'll tell him what happens next and says that Suchan will suffocate and pass out. And when he wakes up, both he and Dowo will have completed their feeding and training sessions. In other words, Jang will start a new life, drained of every last drop of his humanity. Upon hearing this, our protagonist struggles, declaring that he doesn't want to become a monster. The young man, almost fainting, begins to cry out for help, hoping someone will save him. A familiar figure appears outside the aquarium, ready to punch through. With just one blow, Part manages to destroy the creator's defense mechanism. The man, seeing his aquarium shattered, is utterly shocked. The girl grabs Jang's arm as the boy breathes a little more easily. Heejin jokes, saying it's a bit silly for her friend to be drowning when he has a pair of wings. With a gentle expression, she comments that she's there to help him get out of that place. The boy is extremely confused and asks how his friend managed to get there. She explains that the nest agents began searching as soon as she told the professor that Jang and Dowa had disappeared. However, Jang's phone being off didn't help, but Professor Me was able to track him down. The young man remembers that Professor Me had sent soldiers who were part of the nest's security to follow Miss Gaeun. A few hours before all of this, we see a person in the trees noticing that Gaeun wasn't very active. However, for some reason, the person notices that Gaeun is starting to disappear. We then see that it was the teleporter who informed Sin that the creator was waiting for her and would escort her to the meeting. The boy following Sin thinks he should report to the school that he lost track of her, until he sees something in the sky. The young man sees Jang flying through the air, and Park finishes the explanation, saying that they were lucky, and that the security agent spotted Jang flying. She also says that the girl who had Jang's jacket explained what happened, and Yerim is safe with the nest, so there's nothing more to worry about. Interrupting that beautiful moment, Jang notices something and starts running with Park as Doa is attempting to attack them. The young girl is extremely confused, and the boy asks her to be careful. He explains that Doa is not the same now because they were controlling her with some kind of venom. Gagan also enters the fight and says it's nice to see Park there, calling her the professor's little puppy. Park manages to defend herself and realizes that Gagan is the one who released the mantis that day. Before she can think about it, Doa also charges at her own friend, trying to attack her. However, Heejin in midair grabs Doa's head and apologizes. She slams the girl's head into the ground while commenting that it only took one hit to knock her out of it. While doing this, Park is struck by Gayan's tail, and the woman remarks that she is very violent. Gayan continues trying to attack Park and then says that she almost killed her own friend. Gayan notices that Jang is trying to attack her and manages to dodge, then tells him not to interfere in the girl's conversation. Once again, Jang is covered in spider webs, and the creator pulls him back, asking the boy to wait a bit as he hadn't finished yet. The man controlling Jang throws his head into Park, causing the two friends to collide. Even injured, the girl helps our protagonist free himself from the webs and asks if he's okay. Heejin warns our protagonist that those two weren't just ordinary insects, and looking more closely, they're as powerful as Professor G, if not more. Gayan tells the creator that the girl's head is hers, and the man agrees as he has no interest in dirty cockroaches. Stu-chan, seeing the situation, asks his friend to leave with Doa because they might not have a chance to win. Park promptly refuses and prepares for the fight. The young woman asks if Su-chan remembers what he said the day his student ID was taken. The boy then recalls the moment he saved Park and wasn't alone. Who arrives once again, just like in the past, is Seong, kicking and exploding the water bubble around the creator's head. Completely enraged, he asks what the hell those people are doing to his friends. Sin gets excited when she notices another familiar face, but something begins to cover her body. The young woman assumes it's a spider web, but soon realizes it's not. It's silk thread. In the blink of an eye, the silk threads come together, turning into a straitjacket that traps Sin. Jang is extremely surprised by this, as the girl turned the silk into clothing in an instant. It's revealed that the one doing this was Shuoyun, along with her green-haired friend, and the girl tells the newcomer to consider it a debt paid. The creator becomes extremely excited by the situation, stating that it's all incredibly interesting. The man realizes they're infested with nest pests and says they'll have to get rid of them. Gaeun, arrogantly, frees herself from the clothing and claims it doesn't matter because they are just stupid larvae with a few tricks, and as far as she's concerned, they can kill them all. Someone appears behind Gaeun with a bright light, asking if she'll enjoy this little trick of theirs. An explosion occurs, creating a cloud of smoke that covers the entire area. This unknown person says that those people are pathetic fools and asks if they really thought they would escape from this twice. This person states that, as they said before, they will do whatever it takes to protect the nest. Then it's revealed that this person is Ji, who is now questioning who will burn first. Gaeun, realizing it's her professor, becomes frightened, and the man says he knew Sin wasn't expecting him there. Jun says that he had already mentioned they would meet again, which is why he came there, because he's getting fed up with Sin and her interference in his students' lives. The man also mentions that the burn scar he gave her 5 years ago wasn't lesson enough for her, so now he'll just have to burn his entire student. Gaeun starts laughing and asks her professor not to live in the past. She orders him to shut up and come into the fight, then she gets ready. Without hesitation, the old man uses his complex and charges at the woman to end her life. Seeing this, the creator says that while he's sure it would be interesting to watch, it's enough for now, so he decides that they will retreat. The man covers Gaeun's entire body with his spider web and pulls her back. The girl questions what the creator is doing, and the man simply asks her to leave the rest to him. He calls the teleporter Pill and asks him to take the girl to safety, to which Pill replies that they will wait for the creator at the lab. Seeing this, Jun becomes extremely confused, realizing that the person suddenly disappeared. The creator tells Jir that they should call it a day and sent Gaeun away because he didn't want any more bloodshed. However, before he could continue talking, Jun fires one of his explosions at his enemy. The professor says he can assume that this man is the leader of the pests, and Jang promptly agrees. Jun also mentions that they searched everywhere to find the leader of the covert forces, collecting all the jungle juice, and now he's finally found him. And all thanks to his persistent attempts to threaten the lives of the Nest students. Finally, Ju says that if this isn't retribution, he doesn't know what is, and that he's just giving back what was done to him. Jun begins preparing an attack, thinking he won't worry about the side effects and will just compress the explosion to increase the firepower. With that immense explosion, the water bubble surrounding the creator is destroyed even before it reaches him. Then the explosion finally hits the man, causing massive destruction everywhere. Even far away, the teleporter can feel the power. Some nest assistants who also feel it remark that no one compares to Professor G, as his explosive power is incredible. Seeing this, Jang thinks that it will do the job, but his expression suddenly changes to one of despair. As the smoke clears, Jun sees in front of him a giant, extremely disgusting centipede and wonders what it is. This bizarre creature is defending the creator, who says he was nearly roasted and admits that Jun's bombardier beetle power is impressive. However, now it's his turn to show off a little, and the giant monster begins attacking everyone present. The beast causes massive destruction everywhere, demonstrating its immense strength. The creator comments that the creature is magnificent and that it's quite rare to find one that large, all thanks to constant feeding training, of course. Finally, the man asks Jun to believe him when he says he's ending things today for the professor's sake, not his own, because it would be a shame to kill all those people at that moment, and it's revealed that the creature is a giant scolopendra. Seeing this, Jang wonders how an insect could be so terrifying and evoke so much fear. Feeling the crushing pressure of the creature, he thinks that he can't even get close to it. The creator, standing atop the enormous monster, says he had planned to devour them all, starting with Dowa, but he can wait a bit longer because he still has things to do. He bids them farewell, and the giant monster begins burrowing into the ground and disappearing. Jun is impressed that the creator managed to dig such an escape tunnel. Jang, panting, thinks they could still enter the hole as there are still many children trapped. But before he can continue speaking, the young man collapses from exhaustion. Seeing this, Professor G realizes the boy pushed himself to the limit as he expected, considering the strength of the opponent he faced. Even so, he's also a bit impressed, as he didn't think his student could endure that much. Smiling, the man says that the kid really has potential. A little later, Jang recounts that with that, the incident came to an end, and everyone returned to the nest safely. According to the lab tests, Doa's body was almost back to normal, but she suffered some side effects from the neurotoxin, though her body recovered. Yerim and the other children were taken to another center, and the Nest Council arranged everything, with Professor G assuring them they would be in trustworthy hands. They couldn't track down Gayan, Sin, or the creator, and that was what worried our protagonist the most. Lee was telling someone that he also didn't know where those people went, since his only job was to infiltrate the nest and protect the orphanage. Suchan, hearing this, questions why the boy is back, and he explains that all the other hospital rooms were full. Seong arrives, stating that Junian had some nerve to stay there. While intimidating Lee, Seong tells him he should be locked up in the basement like the worthless worm he is. Lee simply ignores him and turns his attention to Jang, calling for the boy. The boy says that he believes people become miserable. They are too weak to have power, even after losing to Suchan. His beliefs remain the same. Upon hearing this, Jang is extremely impressed, as he didn't know that the boy had been thinking about that for so long. The young man recalls a moment from his fight with Lee when the boy said that life was a tragedy without power, and with that, our protagonist becomes reflective. Jang tells his enemy that he has to agree that the world is quite harsh because a person's life is usually determined by their origins, but he saw a few things differently in Lee. The young man explains that when it comes to life and ease, he didn't think those things matter all that much. Hearing this, Lee, lost in thought, remembers another time when he tried to defend his mother and was beaten. On that day, the man who was attacked by Lee said he hated children and went to hit him. However, his mother, even though injured and weakened, managed to protect the boy. Junian thinks that his mother was so fragile and had nothing to her name, but she always told him not to worry about any of that and that she was always fine. And confused, the young man wonders why his mother always told him they would be happy. With that, the boy becomes deeply immersed in his thoughts until someone comes knocking on the door. But he says his goodbyes and explains that he's leaving because he's sure the guards will interrogate him for a while since his wounds are healed. As he leaves the room, he says he'll see Jang around and calls him Nubai. Before leaving, Junian apologizes for all the trouble and says he hopes she can take care of herself. Doa, hearing this, pretends she isn't listening and remains silent. In the dorm, our protagonist is thinking that he's relieved everyone is okay. He comments to himself that he's still worried about the lost children in that horrible lab, but he'll have to wait for the school to find some kind of clue. As he leaves, the boy says that now that he's out of the hospital, he should focus on his classes, but he senses someone's presence. That hooded figure is Hee-jin, and the boy asks what the young woman is doing there so late. The girl apologizes, saying she entered through the window because she really needed to talk to Suchan. With a frightening expression, Park asks if it's really true that our protagonist slept with Doa. Upon hearing this, the boy becomes extremely confused and plays dumb. So the video ends here. If you don't want to miss the next part, activate the notification bell, and see you next time on Tab's channel.